Finding Vanessa by Insomnia Mnemonic. I must confess, this process hasn't exactly been easy for me. Wading through the memories of what happened feels like digging through the rubble of your home after a tornado. You look for anything worth salvaging and try to ignore the rest. Those 3 days feel like an exposed nerve in my mind. The wounds, both physical and mental, are still fresh. But this is a process. And my shrink says the best way of heal is by facing the trauma head on. So I forced myself to remember one more time to put it all on paper. Even the parts that don't make any sense. Well, let's get on with it. This whole thing began a couple of months ago with a phone call to my office. I run a small operation out of New Orleans. Meaning, I answer the phone when I'm not in the field. I'm one of dozens of private investigators in the city specializing in infidelity cases. Yeah, I know. What a cliche. But it pays the bills and keeps the door open, more or less. Riggins, private investigator. I said into the receiver. Answering the phone is just another part of the job. Usually old clients looking for an update or the occasional confused telemarketer. I don't get many cases from new clients calling me, and despite what you may have seen on television, there's no such thing as a walk-in client at a place like this. If I want a new job, I have to make friendly with one of the divorce lawyers, or grease the palms of a certain madam at a certain establishment who knows exactly when a marriage is coming to an abrupt end. I multitask when I can, which means I was cyber-stalking a cheating asshole husband on Facebook when I answered the phone. This douchebag was using an alias to lure impressionable college girls while his long-suffering, soon-to-be ex-wife was at her parents' house, taking care of the kids. That douchebag was my client, and he paid me good money to dig up dirt on his old lady.
Hey, hi.
The voice on the other line stammered. I stopped what I was doing and gave the phone all my attention. The voice sounded like it belonged to someone young. There was a hint of fear in it. Hi, I answered, trying my best to sound like a calming presence. Something I've had zero patience with. You've reached Eric Riggin.
Eric, hey.
The voice answered. Definitely a kid's voice.
It's me, James.
I scanned my mind for any Jameses I knew, but came up blank. Not surprisingly, I don't know many kids. What can I do for you, James?
It's about Vanessa. I don't know if you heard what happened or not.
Holy shit. Vanessa? That must mean that this is Jamie, I asked. Hey, kiddo. I didn't recognize your voice. How long's it been?
It's been a few years.
Yeah, sorry about that. I've never gotten good at the whole uncle thing. After my only brother died, I swore I'd check on his kids from time to time, but there's something about real life. It can't be stopped or paused or put on hold. And sometimes it takes all of your attention. Look, I know I'm a shit uncle like I was a shit brother, but at least I can acknowledge that. So, Vanessa, I asked. It was his older sister. I did some pretty quick math and came up with her current age. 18. Jeez. Has it really been that long? What happened? Is she okay?
I guess you didn't know. I'm not sure who was supposed to tell you.
Oh, shit. My mind jumped to all the worst case scenarios. All my years in that city gave my imagination plenty to work with. Just tear the band-aid off, kid. I haven't heard anything, Jamie. Tell me what happened.
She's missing.
Missing? Well, she's 18, she's got rebellious Riggin blood, and if she's anything like the last time I saw her, smart as hell. Missing could mean anything. How long? I asked.
2 weeks.
Who was the last person to see her? Did she say anything? Leave a note? Pack a bag? I was overloading the poor kid.
Can you maybe come here?
Jamie, I have a job. Jeez, did I really just say that?
Oh, okay. I thought I asked. Thanks anyway.
Hey, wait, is your mom around? Can I talk to? He had already hung up the phone. I have a job? What the hell is wrong with me? It took me all of 10 minutes to make up my mind that I was going back to that shitty town I'd sworn never to go back to. The town I grew up swearing I'd find a way to escape. The town where I left my brother's body in the ground. I made arrangements to put my cases I could on hold and sent some select screenshots to my douchebag client's wife from an anonymous email address. Next, I threw a few supplies into the go bag I kept by the door. Some clothes, cash, smokes, my Beretta 9mm, and a bottle of liquid courage. Everything I might need for a week or so away from the comforts of home. I tried calling Jamie a couple more times after I hit the interstate, but his line stayed busy. I tried at least once an hour, but it never went through. You know that sinking feeling in your gut you get when something bad's about to happen and there's nothing you can do to stop it? That's what I had, times 1,000. I drove all night, only stopping for gas and bathroom breaks, eating and smoking in the car. Vanessa was like her father, probably too much for her own good. And that backward small town wasn't kind to smart or different people. I could just imagine how her last few years had gone. That high school where I had to break a few kids' noses just to get left alone at lunch wasn't for the weak or kind. But maybe things had changed since I left. It was afternoon by the time I got to Jamie and Vanessa's home. The kid was pure shock to see me, and the feeling was absolutely reciprocated. He was 15 years old, 2 feet taller than the last time I saw him. In fact, he was taller than me now. And the spitting image of his father. It was downright eerie. I gave him a hug and he invited me in. I hate to say it, but after all this time, I didn't really do the whole catching up thing. Maybe after this blows over, I'll ask him about his friends, grades, and whatever. But at the moment, all I wanted to do was get down to business. Thankfully, he felt the same way. We sat in the cramped, dusty living room of his family's 3-bedroom ranch-style house. It was smaller than I remember. The front and backyards overgrown with weeds. They lived in the part of town that looked like nature was slowly taking it back. I would say they were in the poor part of town, but this place only had poor parts. The fact that they weren't living in a trailer put them in the top tier of luxury. All I could think while I was there was, God, I hate this place. The story fell together like expected. She had been talking about getting out, and even started working a part-time job at the gas station at the edge of town. One night, she went out for a walk, and that was the last anyone saw of her. Jamie was in the living room and saw her leave, but didn't think much about it. She wasn't carrying anything with her. She didn't look strange or high or drunk. She just walked out in jeans and a yellow t-shirt around 10 o'clock, and then, who knows? These were the facts. The cold, unemotional facts. If I was going to help in any way, it would be because I used the facts to do it. Her car was still in the driveway. None of the neighbors heard or saw anything. She didn't have a boyfriend. Her classmates hadn't had any contact. Her cell phone was plugged in on the table next to her bed. Facts. What about the police? The police had their hands full, but they came out and did a report and said they'd be in touch if they found anything. What about Vanessa's mother? Well, that's where things get uncomfortable. My brother's widow had issues for a while. Losing her husband just cranked them up into a higher gear. She was taking meds for it, but there's only so much you can do for someone that doesn't want to be helped. Miranda had delusions and manic episodes. Some days her grasp on reality was more tenuous than others. I remembered sometime after the funeral when Miranda had confided in me that she didn't believe Vanessa was really her daughter. She was convinced that someone had come shortly after she was born and swapped her out with another baby. Her Vanessa, she said, was in outer space right now, and this thing she was being forced to raise was secretly working for them. I may be a shitty uncle, but Miranda was an even shittier mother. And if this were a worst case scenario, she was my suspect number 1. But Jamie put that to rest. Miranda was off in another city, in the same hospital she had been for nearly 2 years, getting some much needed help. He and Vanessa had pretty much been living on their own ever since. He was shocked that nobody had told me. Look, I finally said after I heard everything that there was to tell. I know you think I can help, but I'm not really qualified to do anything here. I've never worked a missing persons case before in my life. I can pay you, he said defensively. I don't care about money. Not right now. I just want to manage expectations. You know the 48-hour rule, right? He nodded. Well, you also know that Vanessa is a smart kid. Super smart. She's most likely off with someone blowing off some steam in the city. He nodded again. I don't know if I was being convincing or not. Comforting clients is one thing I could never get right. And right now, I had to treat this like a case. Good. And that's when I said something I never should have said. I'm going to find her. I promise. I made my first stop at the sheriff's station to check their status of the investigation. The receptionist made me wait in the lobby for about a half an hour, which I spent looking up any news and public information I could find about this place. It's remarkable how much knowledge is out there on the internet. With social media, everybody's an amateur reporter. Between that, the Freedom of Information Act, and the general dilution of the news, there aren't really any secrets left anymore. A veritable treasure trove of information plugging us all into a shared consciousness and giving you whatever you want to know, if you know where to look. And the reason I'm good at my job is I know where to look. That's why I couldn't believe it when my searches came up blank. This town had no footprint online. That's not just strange, that's impossible. With a town this small, in 30 minutes, I should have been able to find out who the mayor was banging. But I couldn't even find an article about Vanessa. The sheriff will see you now, the receptionist said, snapping me back to reality. His name was Clyde. He was an older guy, bald on top, and a smile that looked forced. His desk was clear, save for a single telephone, and the wall was covered in a giant, dirty American flag. He gestured for me to take a seat. What can I do you for? He asked. I explained the situation and asked him for the police reports concerning Vanessa's disappearance. I'm afraid I can't help you, he said. Miss Riggins' case is part of an ongoing investigation. Look, I'm not trying to break balls or get in the way here. I just want to help find my niece. The sheriff let out a long sigh and lost his smile, dropping the facade. I knew that look, from all the times I had it on my face. There was bad news that he didn't want to deliver. We have a lead on what happened to your niece. A bunch of kids in town went missing not too long ago, part of some neo-religious bullshit cult. We think maybe Vanessa got caught up in it somehow. What are you thinking? We don't know, but we do have a suspect in custody. Jesus Christ, you don't think he murdered them, do you? The sheriff left for a minute and came back with a thick file, dropping it on the desk in front of me. Everything we have is in there. This case gets pretty fucking strange, and we're still piecing it together. You look like a smart enough guy. I don't have to tell you. Yeah, you didn't give me this file. I don't know anything. Good, but if you do find something, you'll know as soon as I do. I thanked him and we shook hands before I left. Out in the lobby, I saw a couple of deputies fixing up some coffee. I approached them and asked, "Do you mind if I grab a cup?" "Knock yourself out," said the bigger of the two. He was an intimidating figure, 6'2" and built like a linebacker. The name on his pin said Williams. The smaller one was still taller than me, but lanky and young, probably a fresh recruit. His pin read Franklin. Franklin folded his arms and sized me up. "You some kind of reporter?" he asked. "Not me. I'm Vanessa Riggins' uncle." "Who?" he asked. I gave them my best cold stare. "Vanessa Riggins, the young woman that went missing a couple of weeks ago?" Franklin shrugged and said, "Which one?" Williams hit him in the chest. "Show a little humanity, man." "Sorry, I didn't mean... You know, we got the guy. I mean, he hasn't confessed to anything, but... It's fine," I said. Shitty town, shitty Leos. "Well, what are you planning to do?" asked Williams. "I'm retracing her last days. I guess I'll go check out the gas station where she worked. When I said that, it was like the air was sucked out of the room. I've trained myself to watch reactions to know when people are lying, but any idiot could see Franklin go pale. The hair on his skin stood straight up, and he threw an awkward glance at the older cop. This rookie had no poker face. William tried to play it off cool, but Franklin already blew that. He took a deliberate sip of coffee and tried to sound disinterested. The gas station at the edge of town, huh? You been out there yet? It's been a long time since I lived here, but I remember the stories. There's something weird going on at the edge of town, where the woods are haunted and the creatures wait to eat you. I had no idea that the stories were still persisting. Or maybe not. Maybe this was something else. Not yet. Why? William searched for the words that would make sense, but obviously he couldn't find them. There's been reports of bears activity out in that area. Just be careful, okay? Fuck you. If there's something going on, just tell me. Will do, deputy. My next stop was the town hall. Something about the glaring lack of information online about a mass disappearance didn't sit right with me. Not surprising, the place was closed when I got there. By the looks of it, the place had been closed for a while. The front lawn was wild with weeds, and newspapers were piled up in various stages of decomposition by the front door. Somewhere, a public official is collecting a paycheck to do nothing. I know I've said it before, but seriously, fuck this town. As long as I'm living in a pre-modern hellhole, I thought to myself, I may as well start liking it. My next stop was the Old Faithful for information gathering, the local library. Once again, I was hit with the sensation that this place that I used to see all the time as a child must have gotten smaller since I was last here. But that smell, old books mixed with mildew, was as pungent as ever. I found the librarian taking a nap at her station and asked her if the place kept records of local newspapers. She just laughed at me. Local newspapers? Here? Have you seen this town? Only half the people here are literate, and half of those are on meth. What newspaper do you think these people are buying? I apologized for wasting her time and turned to leave, but then she told me to stop and come back. I think she felt sorry for me. Hey, look, if you need information about this town, there is one guy who can help you. He's been around long enough that he knows everything and everyone. She scribbled a name and address onto a piece of loose-leaf paper and gave it to me. When you get here, ask for Roger. He'll be able to help you. Here I was, on my 5th stop today, with exactly jack and shit to show for it. I wasn't any closer to figuring out what happened to Vanessa. If anything, I felt like I was further away, being pulled into this rabbit hole of bullshit and weirdness. Was it even worth going to check out this Roger guy? I took a second to center myself and think about it. Facts. Those are all I need right now. Facts. At this moment, I don't have what I need. Why not see what Roger knows? I plugged the address into my GPS and laughed to myself when I saw where I was going. My old high school building was just as horrible and broken down as it had been when I left, but nothing a few coats of paint wouldn't cover. I wasn't sure what I was doing when I parked the car and went inside, but that state of blindly fumbling along hoping for a clue was turning into the theme of this trip. The school was small and dimly lit, and I could hear the buzz of the lights on the ceiling just a few inches above my head. I felt like a giant in here, and I couldn't believe children crammed themselves into this building. Here I was, all by myself, feeling claustrophobic. Claustrophobic and a little dizzy. Can I help you? Or at least, I thought I was by myself. I noticed a short guy in jeans and an AC/DC t-shirt holding a mop looking at me from inside of one of the classrooms. Yeah, I said. You work here? Nobody's supposed to be here. School's closed. I'm looking for Roger. The guy gently set his mop down and pulled out a pair of glasses, putting them on before responding. Are you a friend of his? Not exactly. I'm looking for my niece. She went missing. And you think Roger had something to do with it? Are you Roger? No, I wish. Well, if you don't mind pointing me in the right direction. Roger's in his office. I'll show you how to get there. Great. The janitor walked slowly with a hunch, hands in his pockets, eyes on the ground. He didn't say anything as he led me down the hallway, around a corner, and up to a closed door when he finally broke the silence. This is Roger's office. I thanked him and waited for him to leave, but he gently knocked on the door. Hey Roger, this guy's out here. He wants to see you. Somewhere inside I heard a muffled, Go away. Come on, Roger, open up. He gave me an awkward smile and a shrug. A few seconds passed before the janitor let out a long sigh and grabbed the doorknob, opening it and stepped inside. I guess if I had to pick the exact moment where my case went from weird to batshit insane, this would be the one. The room wasn't a room at all. It was just a simple, dirty supply closet, barely big enough for the janitor to fit inside, with shelves on every wall lined with cleaning supplies and boxes. The janitor flicked on the lights and bent down to the ground and pulled up an old wooden crate into the center of the floor. Roger, are you here? Didn't you hear what I said? He opened the crate and... Jesus Christ. I can't even believe I'm writing this. He pulled Roger out of a box. He turned and faced me, holding Roger in his arms. Roger was an old-fashioned wooden ventriloquist dummy with a black suit painted on. The eyes popped open and looked at me. Then his head spun around to look at the janitor, then back to me. The dummy yawned and stretched, and went through the show of waking up before finally speaking. Who the hell is this guy? Didn't you see the sign on my door that said do not disturb? Roger's voice had the slight tinge of a Bostonian accent. I couldn't help myself. What the fuck is this? I yelled. Some kind of stupid joke? My niece is missing. She could be dead for all I know and you're playing games right now? It took a lot of self-control not to sock the janitor across the face. Instead, I just turned and started walking away. Detective, wait! He yelled to me in the puppet's voice. I stopped and turned back. How did you know I was a detective? I asked. Oh, I know lots of things, he said through the puppet. It was difficult listening to him because he refused to make eye contact, choosing instead to stare at the puppet, who was looking at me. I had to give him credit. I couldn't see his lips moving at all. For instance, I know you drove here from New Orleans. You stopped by the sheriff's station and the library. They were no help. And now you want answers to what happened to Vanessa. Alright, I said. I'll bite. How did you know all that? The janitor refused to break character, saying everything through the doll. It's in the details. The Beretta holstered under your jacket. The tactical boots, the haircut, not the least of all the police report sticking out of your back pocket. I know you're not working directly with the sheriff's department because you haven't shaved in at least a week. So that says private eye. And I know you hit up the library because the librarian is the only person that could have possibly known I was here. I know you're looking for Vanessa Riggin because, unlike some people, I keep up with the news. You said your niece went missing. Assuming neither of you adopted, there's only one missing local girl that shares any of your dominant features. Alright, I said. This guy wasn't terrible. Maybe had a few screws loose, but credit where it's due. He had the Sherlock shtick down pat. What about New Orleans? How did you know I drove all night? 2 reasons. First, you smell like you haven't showered in a couple days. And second, I stole your wallet and looked at the address on your ID. He extended his wooden puppet arm and sure enough, the little bastard was holding my wallet. And to be honest, I wasn't even mad. This little shit got the jump on me. And that's all it takes to earn my respect. I actually laughed. Alright, Roger, how does this work? I pay you to be my research consultant? Believe it or not, said the puppet, I'm not big on money. What I deal in is information and favors. I can tell you don't have any of the former, so I'll take the latter. 1 favor at the time of my choosing, and in return, I'll look up everything there is to find out about what happened to your niece. When I get something, I'll call you. I shrugged. Okay, fine. Shake on it? I'm not proud to say this, but I shook hands with the puppet. Then he gave me back my wallet. I finally got around to hitting up the gas station where Vanessa worked before her disappearance. And let me say, what a shithole. From the outside, it looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. When I walked in, I could smell fresh paint and raw sewage. The man behind the register was smoking a cigarette and stacking pennies into a little pyramid, oblivious to my presence. It was right then that my tooth started hurting like hell, so I grabbed a box of BC Power and walked up to the register. "Hey," I said to the clerk. He was a young, lanky, blonde guy with blue eyes that reminded me of what a golden retriever would look like in human form. His name tag said Jerry. He looked up at me and smiled. "Hey," he said back, before returning his attention to the coin pyramid. "I want to buy this," I said, getting a little annoyed. "How much is it?" the guy asked. "I don't know. You're the one at the cash register. You tell me." He looked at the box, then at me. "What's it worth to you?" "Look, man, I just want to buy this. I'm not trying to play games here." Jerry scowled at the box and said, "Just keep it." "What?" "It's yours, on the house." I sighed and put a $5 bill on the counter before heading to the bathroom for tap water to wash it down. I must have been distracted by the idiocy of the clerk. I didn't even notice until I was already in the bathroom that there was someone else in there. I went straight for the sink and turned on the faucet. Then I heard it. Guitar music. I turned around to see a man standing next to the urinal wearing nothing but a cowboy hat, red boxers, and boots, playing a familiar tune on a wooden guitar slung over his shoulder. Ah, shit. I didn't know it was occupied. The man started to sing along to the tune he was playing.
There is a house in New Orleans.
Are you freaking kidding me?
They call around.
He turned, still playing and singing, and walked right out of the bathroom. The fuck? I took 2 BC powders and washed it down with water that tasted especially metallic before I went back to the lobby. The clerk lit another cigarette and the $5 bill was still on the counter. "What was that all about?" I asked. "What was what all about?" "That guitar guy in his boxers. That some kind of act or something?" Jerry looked around the store, then back to me. "Where?" "He was in the bathroom with me. The guy in a cowboy hat. Ringing any bells?" "Oh," he said. "That might have been the bathroom cowboy. Did he have a beard?" "No." "That does sound like the bathroom cowboy." "Alright, look. I'm tired of playing games. I want to ask you a few questions. Is that okay?" Jerry grinned. "I like questions." "There was a girl that used to work here, named Vanessa. Did you know her?" "Oh, I'm actually pretty new. You might want to talk to the other clerk, Jack." "Okay, when does Jack come in?" "He should be here in an hour or so." "You want some jerky?" Jerry extended a half-eaten stick of jerky towards me. Before I could say, "Hell no," the phone on Jerry's desk started ringing. He answered with a, "Yellow." After a second, he looked at me and said, "Are you Eric Riggin?" "That's weird." "Yeah, it's for you." He handed me the receiver. "This is Eric."
Mr. Riggin, it's Officer Clyde. I've been trying to reach you. Figured when your phone kept going to voicemail, you must be in the part of town without reception.
"Is there a development?" I asked.
No. Look, I don't know how you know Roger, but next time you see him, tell him we're even.
"What do you mean?"
Roger is calling in his one favor. I know you've probably done interrogations before, right? I'm giving you 20 minutes with the suspect we have in custody. After that, you're done. And officially, this never happened. Come here before I change my mind.
"Okay, I'm on my way. What's his name?"
Middleton. Spencer Middleton.
Spencer Middleton's hands were shackled to a steel plate that had been lazily welded onto a metal table in the center of the interrogation room. It was barely larger than Roger's supply closet. One light overhead, no window, 2 folding chairs, and a plastic camera tripod in the corner closest to the door. They put him in an orange jumpsuit a couple sizes too big. Someone had roughed him up pretty good. He had a swollen shiner under his left eye that blended into the purple bruises covering most of his face. He saw me. He grinned. "Well, you don't look like a lawyer, and you sure as hell ain't a cop. Let me guess. You're the newest one they sent to kill me." I took a second to gain the sense of the man I was talking to. The clock was ticking down. 20 minutes. But those first brief moments set the trajectory and could make all the difference. Here I was, a few feet away from the asshole who probably killed my niece, and I needed to figure out how to pry information from him. I was coming into this with nothing. No carrot, no stick. So how do I trip him up? Hell, maybe he'll just give me what I want out of the goodness of his heart. I had done a little research in the drive over. Spencer was a local who disappeared a while back and joined the army. After an honorable discharge, he made it a point to mostly live off the grid, save for a few run-ins with the law. He had a habit of starting or ending fights, depending how you look at it. I made my move, returning his smile and pulling out the chair on the other side of the table. From where I sat, I could see the man had a nasty-looking scar across his throat. I sat and faced him, waiting to see if he had anything else to offer. He didn't, so I went first. "Who's trying to kill you, Spencer?" He laughed softly and said, "Hey, don't I know you?" I doubt it. "Yeah, I do. You went to my high school, right? You're Donnie's brother." I maintained my poker face the best I could, burying the sting of hearing this asshole mention my brother's name. It wasn't time yet to show my hand. At least, I had him talking. "You said someone's out to kill you. Why would someone want you dead? Did you do something?" "You know, when I get out of here, I'm going to cut your face open." "From here?" From across the table, he pointed at a spot just over my right eye. "To here." He dragged his pointer finger down slowly towards my neck. I took a long breath. I'm not a cop or a lawyer, just an interested third party. "There sure seems to be a lot of those in this town, aren't there?" "What do you mean by that?" Spencer relaxed in his chair and leaned his head back to stare at the ceiling. "Man, come on. Just ask me whatever it is you came here to ask, alright? I'm starting to think you might not know anything. Maybe the sheriff oversold you as some kind of badass when you're really just a guy who was in the wrong place and dumb enough not to look guilty. You're going to use pride and ego on me, Riggin? This ain't amateur hour. I spent years on the other side of this. I've interrogated Al-Qaeda in a cave in the desert." Shit, this asshole had my number. "Look," he went on, "I'm not going to bullshit you. Quit trying to work around and ask me the fucking question you came here to ask." This asshole was running the show and we both knew it. Might as well take a shot, right? "Do you know what happened to my niece, Vanessa?" Spencer held up both palms. "Is that supposed to be a no?" I asked. "That's supposed to be, let's make a deal, Clarice. Quid pro quo, right?" "Alright," I said. "What do you want, Dr. Lecter? And more importantly, what are you offering?" "I can tell you exactly where a missing teenage girl went, where you can find her, and you can ask her yourself what happened. I can draw you a fucking map if you want, but in exchange, I want something from you. Something small. Something you won't even miss." My heart was pounding. It took every bit of restraint I had not to leap across the table and strangle the answers I wanted out of him. "Okay," I said. "Name your price." Spencer leaned over and spoke each syllable deliberately. "I want one of your teeth." He smiled and then laughed again. "What the fuck did you say?" "That's all I want. I want you to pick a tooth. Any tooth, and pull it out for me. You've got dozens, right? You gonna miss one? I don't think so. I want you to pull a tooth out for me, and I'll tell you exactly where you can find her." "I hope you burn in hell, you piece of shit. Really? You value your teeth more than your own family? Good thing your brother isn't alive to see you make this choice." I knew he was baiting me, and I wish I'd been smarter, but I wasn't. I jumped out of my chair so fast it launched across the room, and swung a wild right hook that would have broken bones if it had landed. But he dodged by an inch, caught me by my fist, and used my follow-through to pull me across the table. My face hit metal, and before I knew it, he had his arm hooked under my chin. In a single motion, he twisted me onto my back and locked his arm against my windpipe, squeezing tighter and tighter until I started to black out. I tried to scream, but there was no air going in or coming out. The world went black, and I knew I was done for. That son of a bitch was faster and stronger than I could have ever expected. And I'm glad I'm more lucky than careless. I didn't hear the deputies come in, but if they had waited a few more seconds to pull me away, I might not be here right now. As they helped me out of the room, Spencer let out a loud, gleeful cackle that followed me all the way into the lobby. It was getting dark by the time I was patched up and leaving the sheriff's station. I had decided to spend the rest of the day getting shit-faced. That asshole had all but confessed to killing Vanessa, but that wasn't enough. He needed to rub it in my face, and I let him. I had the who, just not the how, where, or the why. But with a guy like that, does there really even need to be a why? Armed with this information, I wasn't exactly in a hurry to go back and see Jamie. The only bar in town was closed for some kind of bullshit holiday, so I decided to celebrate alone. The bottle in my go bag might not be enough, I thought, so I went back to that shitty gas station at the edge of town. The sheriff was pissed at me for what happened, and I don't blame him. I lost my cool, and you can't do that if you're working on this side of the law, which, for the time being, I was. I couldn't help but wonder how hard it would be to get away with killing Spencer while he was in custody, though. When I got to the gas station, the clerk behind the counter didn't even look up from the book he was reading. He was considerably younger than me, with bags under his eyes like he hasn't slept in days. A pair of crutches were leaning on the counter next to him. I bought a bottle of whiskey and a pack of smokes, and as he rung me up, I asked him, "Hey, do you know a good hotel around here?" "Nope," he simply said after handing me my change and went back to his book. "Alright, thank you, Mr. Personality." When I got back to my car, I tried to look up the nearest place with a cheap hotel, but I was reminded that this part of town doesn't get cell or internet service. All I wanted to do at that moment was drink, shower, and sleep. After a minute of thinking about it, I decided I could do with 2 out of 3. After getting significantly inebriated, I put my seat into a reclined position and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. I woke up the next morning, still a little drunk to the sound of my cell phone ringing. When I checked the caller ID, I couldn't understand what I was seeing. Donnie Cell. It rang a couple more times while I sat up and tried to wrap my head around the moment. Where was I again? My car? What happened yesterday? The weight of all of it came crashing back into place in an instant. Vanessa's killer was sitting in a cell somewhere laughing at me. The phone continued to ring. I looked at it again, but this part didn't make sense. Who was calling me from my brother's phone? And how? I answered. "Hello?"
Hey, Eric. It's been a while, huh?
What the fucking fuck? What the fuck? Who is this?
I'm not sure how long I've got. I've been trying to get through to one of you for a long time.
I asked you a question. Who is this?
You know who this is, Eric.
My brother's dead, and when I find out who you are, I'll make sure you are too.
Always gotta be the badass, huh? Remember Merlin?
Merlin. I hadn't thought about that in a long time. When we were kids, sometimes we would play superheroes. We would take turns being the bad guy. I always wanted to be Batman or Wolverine, but Donnie always wanted to be a wizard named Merlin. He started his own mythology around the character, a time-traveling wizard that rode a motorcycle. When I got a little too old to play make-believe, he started drawing comic books about the guy. I never told him, but I found them and read a few. They were impressive. Anyone could know about Merlin.
Would anybody know that I stole a car in junior year, and you took the blame for it?
A chill ran down my spine, and suddenly, the car felt way too cramped for me. I opened up the door and tried to step out, but a dizzy spell almost put me on my ass. I held the roof of the car until it passed. Then I put the phone back to my ear. Who is this?
I told you. It's me.
Tell me the truth.
You're looking for Vanessa. You've got to find her.
I watched my brother die. I saw somebody put his body in the ground.
I died. And then they came for me, and they put me here.
Where is here?
I don't know, but I do know they're watching you. They've been watching you ever since you came back. I think they haven't decided what they're going to do with you yet. We're both running out of time. You have to get to Vanessa before they get to you. Tell my kids I love them.
There was a loud crackle from the phone and then it disconnected. I stared at the screen like an idiot for way too long. Then I did the only thing I could think of. I dialed the number back. At that exact moment, I heard a cell phone ringing from somewhere beyond the gas station. That son of a bitch is here. I ran back there towards the sound of the ringing. It was hard to pinpoint exactly where it started, but I knew it was coming from somewhere in the woods, beyond the tree line. Making a mental note on the way to check out the large mound of fresh dirt next to the dumpster. It looked like something had been buried there recently, but I couldn't afford that distraction yet. How many times had it rung? 4 or 5? The ringing continued somewhere much deeper in the woods. I followed, trying to determine exactly where the noise was coming from. As I ran further in, the ringing became more of an echo, all around me. I checked the phone still in my hand, and saw the message. No network detected. Emergency calls only. The ringing got louder, then it turned into something else. No longer ringing. More like loud chirping, like some kind of insect, then it morphed into a deafening noise, somewhere between a roar and a scream all around me. I pocketed the phone and instinctively reached for my piece, but it wasn't there. I'd left it in the car. Look, I know how this sounds. It's crazy, and I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but it only got worse. The temperature in that spot started to crank up, like I was next to an invisible fire ready to consume the entire forest. I had the sensation that I was burning up, and my flight or fight response kicked into overgear. I picked a direction and started running as fast and as hard as I could. The heat got further and further away as I jumped over logs and limbs and ditches, and finally found a clearing. My lungs were ready to explode by the time I stopped and collapsed to my knees and threw up. I didn't have long to relax before I heard something crunching in the forest in front of me. I pushed myself back onto my feet and scanned the area for any kind of weapon, but there wasn't anything worth grabbing. Not a rock or a decent stick or even a tree nearby worth hiding behind. What was I thinking running out here into the middle of this clearing? I was stuck in the dead center of a nearly perfect circle the size of a tennis court. No trees, only knee-high grass. Basically, a sitting duck. Then I saw it, a bear at the edge of the trees right in front of me. I say that it was a bear, which is technically true, but also not. It looked at me, and I was convinced that I'd lost my mind and gone crazy. Because in that moment, not a damn thing made sense. The thing I was looking at was, to the best I can tell, an enormous grown man, nearly 7 feet tall, wearing a tan teddy bear costume, complete with an enormous felt head and big button eyes the size of saucers. It looked like some kind of school mascot from a nightmare. It was covered in dirt and leaves, and when it saw me, it started waving excitedly. "Hey," I said uncertainly. Then it turned both of its middle fingers up to me and did a little dance. "Hey man, I'm kinda lost." The bear didn't say anything. It just pointed at me, and then its crotch, and started pelvic thrusting the air. God, I wish I had my gun right now. I woke up, suspended off the ground in a small dark room with that ever so familiar feeling of not knowing where the hell I was. The walls were covered in shelves that were packed with cleaning supplies, paper products, and canned goods. Then I tried to sit up. The world shook and swung under me. It took me a few tries before I realized I was being held up by a braided rope hammock. "You awake?" a voice asked to my right. I turned to see the gas station clerk from earlier, Jerry, sitting on a milk crate and smiling. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my leg like electricity, and I fell back into the hammock. Where am I? What happened? Did you paint my nails? I looked at the red nail polish on my right hand, then at Jerry. "You like it?" "No." Okay, that's fair. You're more of a fire truck than a cherry red anyway, but I thought I'd take the chance. I looked at the source of pain on my leg and saw that it had been wrapped tightly in a makeshift duct tape cast that was wrapped around my pants leg. Then, that's when it all came back to me. A bizarre memory that would have been out of a David Lynch fever dream. I reached out and grabbed Jerry by the collar of his shirt and yanked him close to me. I need to talk to the sheriff. Now. The man in the bear costume stayed at the other side of the clearing, spinning his arms and legs in a bizarre dance that looked like a PCP Jack teenager at the disco, occasionally looking my way to make sure I was still watching. I slowly started to back up, putting one foot behind the other, carefully adding distance between us. I didn't know the score, but I sure as hell didn't want to push my luck. Once I got back to my car, I could call the sheriff and have him bring all his deputies and an extra large straitjacket, but that plan required that I first get back to my car. I had my eyes locked on the bear man, so I saw exactly when the arrow whipped right through him. It came from somewhere in the forest behind him, entered the bear suit from the back, just below the armpit, and passed straight through the other side towards me. I didn't even have time or the reflexes to dodge. Next thing I knew, I had been struck. I hit the ground and the man in the bear costume grabbed his wounds and danced his way back into the woods. The arrow had lodged itself deep in my left leg, a few inches above the knee, with the light wooden shaft protruding straight out. It was the single most painful thing I had ever experienced, and sheer adrenaline is probably the only reason I wasn't going right into shock. Two men donned head to toe in camouflage and carrying hunting bows stepped into the clearing at the same spot where the bear man had emerged. They both had shades of green smeared all over their face like war paint. The fat one was cussing and yelling when he emerged. I screamed, partially to get their attention, and partially because I just couldn't help it. "Aw, shit!" yelled the skinny one. "Did we get you?" He dropped his bow and ran over to me while the fat one put his own over a sling on his shoulder and slowly walked over to join us. "Who the fuck are you?" asked the fat one. The skinny one pulled an 8-inch knife out of a sheath on his belt and sliced open my pant leg around where the arrow had lodged. I took a look and wished that I hadn't. "You shot me!" I yelled. It was about the only thing I could muster to say that wasn't a lengthy paragraph of expletives that I couldn't hold in if I tried. The skinny one looked at me defensively. "Well, hell, dude. We weren't expecting no people but us out here." "Bear's gonna get away now, boy," complained the fat one. "You think you can walk?" I didn't answer straight away. The shaft of the arrow was shaking with my pulse, and I knew it was embedded into my femur. The fat man knelt down for a closer look and whistled. "Yep, that's in there all right." I closed my eyes and tried to focus on anything but the pain. Every breath, every heartbeat, every micro movement radiated through the arrow like an antenna into the wound and down the nerve in my leg. My eyes shot open and I let out a scream. The fat one reached out and grabbed the arrow at the base. With his other hand, he grabbed the top and snapped the shaft. I collapsed onto my back and stared at the sky, hoping that the pain would just knock me out already. "There," said the hunter. "Now we don't gotta worry about it snagging on every little thing. Ned, help me get him to the four-wheeler." The other one, Ned, pulled me to my feet and together we went back into the woods. I kept an arm over both their shoulders, basically hanging and letting my bad leg drag the whole way. Not too far into the forest there was a small trail that we followed close to a half-mile before we reached the four-wheelers. I don't remember the ride back to the truck, but I remember smacking me in the face when we got there to make sure I was still alive. "Y'all get him?" asked the fat woman sitting in the driver's seat of the white extended cab truck, stained brown from countless layers of dried mud. The fat man got off the four-wheeler and answered, "Nah, he got away." "I clipped him, though," bragged Ned as he jumped down from the four-wheeler. "Left a blood trail, so we may be able to get him." "Shut up, boy. We ain't going nowhere tonight. Gotta get home before the sun goes down." The woman looked at me and smiled a big, toothless smile, her bright red cheeks standing out against her pale skin, like she had already had a few too many drinks. "Oh, you got something, though." The fat one grabbed me by the hair and yanked me off the four-wheeler, throwing me to the ground. I let out another scream. "What the fuck is wrong with you? Are you crazy? That thing out there isn't a bear, it's a person. And you assholes shot me. I need to go to the hospital for Christ's sake. The fat man looked at the woman and said, Yep, Ned got this one by accident. Well, it ain't a total loss then, she said back. Why is he still alive? They're easier to move when they're alive, and they taste better if they're scared when you put them down. What? Ned let out a whoop and then jumped on top of me, pushing my face into the ground and yanking at my pockets. He managed to dig out my phone, wallet, and keys, before I finally managed to get a handful of dirt and smacked it into his eyes. He fell off me and I jumped to my feet and started running towards the safety of the forest when... bang. I froze. Now, I wouldn't be too keen on running back out there if I were you. I put my hands in the air and slowly turned around to see the face of the fat one pointing a .45 at me, from what I would consider point-blank range. Close enough that I could recognize it was a Dan Wesson specialist. These guys were bow hunting for sport, but smart enough to bring along something heavier just in case. Smarter than me, that's for sure. Why not? I asked. I doubt there's anything out there as bad as right here. Well, that's where you're wrong. Oh! Cooed the woman from inside the truck. Shoot him, shoot him! Shut up, woman! I ain't gonna shoot him just 'cause you say so. Hey now, I said softly. Suddenly the pain in my leg didn't seem so bad. Let's talk about this for a second. You don't have to kill me. I don't know you from Adam. You could just leave me here and we can forget all about this. Ned reached for the gun and said, Let me do it. You got to do the last one. The fat one sighed and handed over the gun. Fine, but aim carefully. One shot, one kill. Wait, I screamed. I know where the bear is. I can take you to him. He's lying, whined the fat woman. No, I'm not. We're friends. Why the hell else would I be out there in the middle of nowhere with the bear? Ned gave the fat man a, what now? Look. The fat man scrunched up his face and thought about it. Okay, he finally said. Take us to him. Then maybe we'll let you go. Maybe. 1 gun, 2 hunting knives, 2 bows, a quiver of arrows. I raced every scenario in my mind quickly. How do I get one of their weapons without getting killed first? Forest, 4-wheeler, truck. Is there any realistic way to escape without being shot in the back? Things weren't looking good, but I was still breathing for the time being. It'll be faster if we take the truck. The hunters were smarter than I would have liked. The big one, I picked up that his name was Paw, put me in the back seat of the cab next to Ned. He threw all of his weapons, knives included, into the truck bed and climbed into the back with us. I was sandwiched with Ned on my right and Paw on my left, and that tiny vehicle smelled like shit. Literally, it smelled like human feces. The seats were torn up and wet, and I saw a few small cockroaches scurry away from us. After Pa slammed his door shut, a tiny face looked back at me from the passenger seat. A little girl with matted blonde hair, no older than 10. She smiled and said, Are we gonna eat this one? Probably, said the fat woman as she cranked the engine. Which way? Asked Pa. I pointed straight ahead. Get up to the main road and take a right. You better not be trying nothing, warned Pa. We hit the main road and the truck climbed up to a slow 30 miles per hour. Go straight for about a mile. Then you'll see a dirt road on the left. Ain't no dirt road, squealed the fat woman in a high-pitched voice. I know these woods like the back of my hands. I ain't remember no dirt road up here. Pa punched me hard in the stomach. You think you're funny, boy? He knocked the wind out of me and I doubled over in the seat as they all started laughing maniacally. There's an expression called ring off, which is much worse than the phrase implies. If you're unfamiliar with the term, allow me to explain. Trappers have to check their traps frequently because if they don't, an animal's survival instinct will kick in and they'll free themselves, one way or another. The most common form of ring off is when a coyote or a jaguar or anything with sharp enough teeth that chews through its own legs and sets itself free. It ain't pretty, but it sure beats the alternative, right? In that moment, I understood exactly how those trapped animals felt. I bit down hard on the exposed piece of arrow shaft as hard as I could stand, and yanked it out as fast as I could. For the second time in as many hours, I experienced the single most painful thing I'd ever feel. But now, the arrow was free from my leg, and I had a weapon. I spit the broken arrowhead into my left hand and stabbed it into Pa's neck, cutting his jugular into a muffled gurgle. "Ah, shit!" yelled Ned as I swung myself onto the seat and planted the foot of my good leg against the side of his face with as much force as I could muster. I pushed his head into the glass of the window, all while holding onto the arrow still embedded in Pa's neck. The little girl started screaming and the fat woman turned around to see what the fuss was about. I turned to her, and then I noticed it. Maybe 100 feet ahead. The man in the bear costume stepping out of the woods crossing the road. I closed my eyes and braced for impact. She must have looked back and seen the bear because the truck lurched wildly to one side, then back to the other. Like she had to swerve to miss, then overcorrected. Then we started rolling. The crash sounded like an explosion. Pieces of broken glass and blood rained down all around me as I hit my head on the roof, then the seat, then the door. Then finally the world stopped spinning and I was on my back with blood stinging my eyes. A warm hand reached under me and dragged me out of the wreckage, and a twisted mass of body and debris, through the cold wet grass, through a ditch, and then dropped me into the road. I wiped my eyes and then looked up at the giant black buttons of a man in the bear costume. He waved at me and then gave me an excited double thumbs up, before walking back to the truck, unzipping the fly on the bear suit, and then pissing all over the wreckage. He did a little jig off into the forest, and that was the last I saw of him. What the fuck is happening? I checked the truck, the driver, Ned, Pa, were all dead. The little girl was nowhere to be found. I know if she had survived, it's unlikely that I'd have any luck finding her. The weapons were gone too, probably flung out in the crash. Even though I would have felt a lot safer packing, it wasn't worth my time to track them down. I made a quick bandage out of my shirt sleeve and then wrapped it around my leg, tight enough to slow the bleeding. Then I found a fallen branch, long and strong enough to serve as a walking stick, and started up the road in the direction of the gas station. I must have been one hell of a sight when I got back there. I was torn up and bleeding from several wounds, but none of that seemed to create a sense of care in the clerk behind the register, who still didn't even have the decency to look up from his damn book. I walked over to him and knocked on the counter, finally drawing his attention. I don't know what it takes to impress this guy, but the sight of me nearest to death sure as hell didn't even register with him. "I need to use your phone." He tapped on a small cardboard sign sitting on the counter. In sloppy black Sharpie, someone had written the message, "If you'd like to use the store phone, it's 25 cents per minute. Please pay in advance. There are no exceptions." I reached for my wallet, only to remember that it wasn't on me. Ned had taken it and left it somewhere out in the woods. "Look, asshole, this is a life or death situation. There's been an accident and I need to call the sheriff." The clerk spun the sign to the opposite side, where someone had written, "No exceptions mean no exceptions. Not even life or death situation. Thank you for understanding. Management." Under normal circumstances, I would have resorted to more physical solution, but at that moment, I started feeling lightheaded and dizzy. Next thing I knew, I was swinging in a hammock with my nails painted. "Where the hell am I?" I repeated the question to Jerry. "You're in the gas station supply closet." "Why?" "Because customers were complaining that they didn't want to step over you every time they wanted to buy something. But don't worry, I already called the deputy that babysits us. She's on her way to arrest you or whatever she does. In the meantime, Jack says you can borrow one of his old crutches." Jerry held out a bottle of water. I took it and downed the whole thing in one pull, then forced myself up from the hammock. "I need to get out of here. There was an accident. People are dead." "Cool," he said. "But you probably shouldn't go anywhere until O'Brien shows up." I ignored him and left the closet on my own 2 feet. The leg in my pain was bad, but bearable. I'd rather power through it than borrow someone else's crutches. When I stepped out into the store, the combination of natural and fluorescent light stung my eyes and gave me the realization that I had absolutely no idea what time it was. "Is that him?" I looked over to the voice to see it was a woman in a deputy uniform staring right at me. She was tall, attractive, and dark-skinned, with hair pulled back in a ponytail, and a look on her face that said, "Don't even think about fucking with me." She had been leaning against the counter next to the cashier, The one with all the books? He looked over at me and then whispered something in her ear that I couldn't make out, which caused her to stand up straight and put her right thumb in her belt next to her gun holster. I've seen this tick before. She was trigger happy and ready to put me down if she needed to. "Mr. Riggin?" she asked. I stood perfectly still and put my hands in front of me in the least intimidating way I could, remembering only then that I still had fresh red nail polish on my fingernails. "Officer?" I said. She took a second, probably trying to figure out what kind of lunatic she was dealing with. In an effort to get in front of the whole thing, I tried explaining the situation. "There's been an accident. I want to give a statement, but I've been attacked and I require medical assistance." She cocked her head slightly to one side. "You look fine to me." "Bullshit, I do." "I was in the truck when it flipped." "What truck? Are you fucking kidding me right now?" Shit, too much. Her fingers were on the gun, ready to pull. I needed to reel it in a little. After a long, deliberate, loud breath, I said, "Sorry, officer. I'm a little shaken up because I was just in an accident. The vehicle I was in went off-road and flipped." "You were in an accident?" "Yes." "Was anybody hurt?" "Was anybody hurt?" That was unexpected. How long had I been unconscious? There's no way they haven't found the wreck, and the bodies by now. Which means she was either screwing with me or testing me. If it were the latter, then why? Why was she trying to trip me up? To get me to contradict my own story? That's when it hit me. This was an interrogation. There were victims, bodies now. Someone was going to have to hang for it. I chose my next words very carefully. "Yeah, 3 people died in the wreck. I came straight here to call the police, but the blood loss knocked me out before I could. I can take you to right where it happened." She took a step towards me, just one, putting herself in between me and the cashier. That's interesting, I thought. If I hadn't been paying attention, I might have missed it, but her body language was telegraphing a clear message. I was an unknown, a potential threat, and her priority in the situation was protecting the guy behind the counter. What was even more interesting is what she didn't do. "All right, Mr. Riggin, we'll take my car and you can show me exactly where this all went down. Sound good?" It was only then that I noticed her soft Brooklyn accent. One thing was for sure, she wasn't local. I'd have to look her up once I got to my phone or someplace with internet. "Yeah, okay." She gestured toward the door and let me lead the way, her hand never leaving the gun until we were both outside. She didn't call it in. I had just informed her that there were 3 dead bodies. She didn't radio dispatch, backup, EMTs, anyone. There was one obvious reason why that would be the case. She must have already known about the wreck. I saw her cruiser in the space furthest from the doors, parked backwards in the spot for a fast getaway. I stepped around to the passenger side and looked back at her, half expecting to see her pull her gun out and take me down right there, but now that we were both outside, she seemed instantly calmer. "Well," she said, "what are you waiting for? Door's unlocked." She opened the driver's side and took her spot behind the wheel. She isn't going to make me ride in the back seat. That's good, I think. I took the spot in O'Brien's passenger side and instantly pulled my seatbelt. But before I could even click it into place, O'Brien had pulled the car onto the road. Which way? I pointed back in the direction I came, downhill away from town. She peeled out and gunned the vehicle. I watched the side of the road for any signs of the bear or the little girl, but at the speed she was driving, I doubt I would have been able to pick them up if they weren't right next to the street. We passed the dirt road that led to the family's hunting ground. I made a mental note to come back later and find where Ned had left my wallet and keys. It should be right up here, around the bend. I replayed the events in my mind. Straight for about a mile, then you'll see a dirt road on the left. Paw punching me in the gut. Their perverse laughter. The arrow, stab, screams, the bear. Alright, slow down, it should be right... O'Brien slowed the car down and hit the red and blues. But we were right where the truck had gone off the road. And... nothing. "Where?" she asked. "Stop the car." I hopped out before she could even come to a complete stop on the shoulder of the road, ignoring the stinging in my leg the best I could. This wasn't possible. I couldn't have been unconscious that long. They had already moved the truck? I ran into the grass and stood in the exact spot where I had been pulled from the mangled wreck earlier that day, but there was nothing there. No sign of any wreckage. No blood, no debris, no ruts in the dirt, not a single blade of grass out of place. O'Brien yelled at me from her spot next to the cruiser. "I don't think it's out here. Maybe we should head up the road. This all looks the same to me." "No, I'm certain it was right here." "Well, it's not right here anymore, so how about we get back into town and you can give a statement?" I took a deep breath and caught the all too familiar aroma. One glaringly out of place on the side of the road near a thick forest. Bleach. I scanned the grass for something, anything that would prove I hadn't imagined it all, and walked up the road for a better look. From there, I scanned both directions. No skid mark, no nothing. This wasn't a pull a wreck out of the woods operation. This was a hardcore cleanup crew. Someone had to put a hell of a lot of effort into covering it up. But why? "Does this street look like it's been cleaned recently?" I asked. O'Brien scoffed by the way of an answer. I crossed to the opposite direction of the road and knelt down. "Pretty sure there's no wreck over there either, nail polish." Whoever did this had resources that I could barely even fathom. This would have taken money, manpower, precision. But even the most thorough cleanup crews will make mistakes when time is a factor. I reached into the grass and picked up a tiny shard of broken safety glass. An old silver pickup pulled up behind the deputy's cruiser. Again, I reached for the empty spot on my side like a phantom limb. I keep expecting to find my handgun, but only to remember that I'm as vulnerable as I was when the family was arguing over who would get to kill me. The man stepped out of the truck and came around to face us with a big friendly smile. He was in his late 50s with a dirty white beard and a camo jacket. A tucked-in white t-shirt showed off a potbelly spilling over the edge of his jeans. "Mornin'," he said, basically ignoring O'Brien. Wait, it was still morning? I hadn't actually seen a clock since I woke up, but there's no way this could have all been cleaned up in a few hours. "Hey," I said back. He laughed and then said, "You look like shit. What happened?" Cut myself shaving. He finally acknowledged O'Brien with the simplest flash of eye contact before looking back up at me and asking, "Y'all lose something?" Before I could answer, his cell phone started ringing. He put up a finger and dug it out of his pocket. "Yeah?" he said. His look turned to one of slight confusion before he lowered it, took a look around, then at the phone, then at O'Brien and me. Then he said, "Is one of you Eric Riggin?" I looked at O'Brien, who shook her head softly and laughed. "Don't look at me." "I'm Eric. It's, for you." I put the glass shard in my pocket and walked over to the man extending his phone. The whole situation was too much for my brain to digest. I genuinely had no idea what was going on, who to trust, or even what was real anymore. That's when I first noticed that my tongue was feeling extra fat, and a warm sensation was pouring over me. It could have been the effect of blood loss, but somehow this felt different. I decided to ignore the feeling for now and reached out for the phone. "This is Eric."
Finally! Where the hell have you been all day?
Out of all the possible voices I expected to hear on the other end of that line, this was not one of them. "Roger?
Who were you expecting? Santa Claus?
How did you find me?"
I know things, Detective. Time to take a little bit on faith, alright? I know the investigation got a little derailed this morning, huh? Somebody is seriously screwing with you, which is a good sign. They're trying to throw you off the scent because you're asking questions. And people around this town don't ask questions. You kicked their hornet's nest and they're pissed off.
I leaned away from O'Brien and whispered this next part into the phone. "Roger, I was attacked. People are dead."
Really?
He didn't sound surprised at all.
Well, we're definitely going to have to talk about that later. For now, I found something in Vanessa's file we need to discuss. You got a gun, yeah?
Yeah, somewhere.
Ditch it. Drop it in the bottom of the ocean if you have to. I guarantee by now, they've tied the ballistics to one or two open murder cases in town.
Tell me one thing. What is going on?
Lose the copper. I don't know who to trust yet, and meet me at the bowling alley at 8 tonight. Come alone. Pay attention. Because you'll probably need to shake that tail. And detective?
Yeah?
Take a shower.
With that, he disconnected. I looked at O'Brien, who was leaning against the trunk of her car, arms crossed and watching me. Who was it? She asked. I handed the phone back to the man and shrugged at the deputy. Looks like I've made a huge mistake. Yeah? She asked incredulously. Yeah, I answered. She gave me a ride back to the gas station while I spun a yarn about having a serious case of sleepwalking. I assured her that I had dreamt the whole thing up and must have gone off into the woods in my unconscious gait, gotten myself scraped up pretty bad, then wandered back into town confused and a little worse for wear. Either she bought my story, or she had her own reasons to accept that there was no reason to press it further. She didn't strike me as an idiot, so I concluded that it must be the latter. She brought me to my car and gave me a straightforward warning before she took off. I don't know what answers you think you're going to find, but I wouldn't stick around much longer if I were you. We got the guy who killed Vanessa, and take it from me, closure is overrated. First thing I did after she took off was check my car to see if I left some spare change somewhere. I figured I could probably dig up enough coins out of the floorboards to give me a bite to eat before hot-wiring the vehicle. I was only a little surprised to see my wallet, phone, and keys sitting on the passenger seat waiting for me. My head was spinning and I desperately needed something in my stomach, even if it was only gas station food. I did a quick run up and down the aisles, collecting whatever foodstuffs didn't look like they would make me throw up. A bag of trail mix, some chips, a stick of jerky, and a Gatorade. I brought them to the counter where the cashier Jack was typing something up on a laptop. I knocked on the counter to get his attention. He looked up from what he was doing and smiled and said, "Found your wallet, huh?" I dropped the stuff in front of him and answered, "Go figure." He rang it all up and I paid. Then he went back to his computer. Didn't feel like waiting any longer, so I opened the bag of chips right there. Then I had a small heart attack when hundreds of tiny spiders poured out of the opening in the bag. They were tiny, black, and crawling all over each other in every direction. I dropped the bag to the ground and started stomping them underneath my boot. "What in the holy fuck?" I yelled at the cashier. He looked back at me with a raised eyebrow and asked, "What?" "Did you not see that? There was..." Right then, I lost all ability to speak. There was something in the store with us. Something impossible. There was a spider crawling up the wall behind the cashier. Only this one wasn't tiny. This one was at least the size of a Rottweiler, with shiny black legs as thick as walking sticks and a pulsating black abdomen. I could see the reflection from the fluorescent lights in its bulging wet black eyes. And I could make out, clear as day, the thick needle-like hairs covering its body. It crawled all the way up the wall, turned upside down on the ceiling, and started toward me. I grabbed the spot on my side where my gun should have been and fell backwards onto a display of pork rinds. Landing on my ass, my voice finally came back to me and I screamed, "What is that fucking thing?" Jack clearly hadn't seen it yet. What? It was crawling slowly but steadily on the ceiling overhead. I waited quietly for it to move past me, never looking away. Only after it had crawled to the other side of the store did I lean over to Jack and whisper, "Did you see that?" Jack followed my eyes to the ceiling and looked back at me and said, "What? Is it a giant spider?" "Yes, what the fuck?" "No." The spider stayed at a constant speed and crawled down the back of the wall near the coolers, but I lost sight of it behind a row of groceries. I jumped to my feet and took a few steps to the side trying to figure out where the thing had gone, but it wasn't there anymore. I looked back at Jack, who was not reacting in the way I would have expected, or really, at all. "What do you mean, no?" I whisper-screamed. He sighed deeply and yelled out, "Marlboro, can you come here for a second?" "Who are you talking to?" He stretched casually and shut his laptop, then looked at me in the eyes and said, "It's the pain meds they gave me. I had to stop taking them because they were making me see spiders." "What?" "I know, right? Weirdest side effect ever, but apparently it's a thing. Brand-specific hallucinations. Spiders everywhere. On my clothes, in the shower, in my toothpaste. I decided that the pain wasn't as bad as seeing spiders in my cereal. Wait, you drugged me? I didn't. The door to the storage closet opened and the clerk from earlier, the one who had painted my nails, came out drinking a beer. You rang? He asked. The cashier answered, Did you give this guy my old pain meds? Oh, most definitely, he answered. I ground up like 4 of them and put them in his water bottle. My heartbeat finally started to go back down to normal. The adrenaline spike slowly replaced by pure, undiluted rage. I tried to hold it together as I asked as calmly as I possibly could, Why would you do that? He smiled and shrugged and said, I was just trying to help. I rubbed my eyes and took a deep breath. If he had been a little closer, I probably would have slugged him. Thankfully, I managed to keep my cool. This is just so fucked. Hey man, are you alright? Asked the cashier. What part of this looks alright to you? I replied. Yeah, I figured as much. You're Vanessa's uncle, right? That's right. You knew her? A little. She was a decent worker. Always showed up on time, never stole anything. I was bummed out when she disappeared. I sorta hate to ask, but do you know what happened to her? Maybe it was just the drugs, but I was having trouble getting a read on this guy. Was he for real? I'm planning on figuring that out. I take it you don't buy the story about her joining a cult? I got the quickest micro-expression when I said cult. He looked at the other worker for a moment, then back to me and said, No, I don't think she joined the cult. There was something else going on here. I asked him directly. What exactly do you think happened? I don't know. The other worker piped in with, Maybe a demon got her. The cashier looked at him and said, What, like in Twin Peaks? Dude, spoilers! That show's been out for 20 years. Either you're gonna watch it or you're not. This was pointless. These two were using each other for deflection, and if I were going to find out what either of them knew, I'd have to separate them. The only question is, how? Right then, the cashier leaned back to grab his crutches off the wall and said, Marlboro, take over for me. I'm going to lunch. Okie dokie, said Jerry, or Marlboro, or whatever the hell his name actually was. He struck me as the kind of guy who might find someone else's name tag and wear it just because. Hey, I said after the cashier stood up, how about I take you to lunch? He looked at me awkwardly for a couple of seconds and asked, Why would you do that? I want to ask you some questions. About Vanessa? I really didn't know her that well. About this town. I'll pay for your lunch. What do you say? He mulled it over for a few more silent seconds and then nodded and said, Okay. I checked my phone during the drive just to see what time it was. 12:05 p.m. Then I tossed it out the window. Even if they haven't bugged it, there's no way I could ever trust it again. We went to this small diner called Maryland's. We both ordered the same thing, a cheeseburger and fries. I took black coffee and he drank root beer. I let him eat before we got to the questions. It didn't take me long to devour my meal. Thankfully, there were no spiders. Whatever Marlboro had put in my drink had worn off completely, and the pain in my leg was back in full force. But it was hard to complain while sitting across from this guy. At least I had all of my limbs. From what I could see, he was a below-the-knee amputee. And the way he worked with his crutches made it clear that this was a recent development. So I decided to keep my complaints to myself for now. After he finished his burger, I tried to ease into the questions and learn as much as he would let me know. This guy was private, and all I could get out of him were the basics. His name was Jack, he was much younger than me and worked at the gas station pretty much since high school. And he liked to mind his own business. I finally got around to asking about his injury, not expecting much of an answer, but surprisingly, he opened up like it was no big deal. I got a complex fracture a while ago and broke my leg in 2 places. Not surprisingly, this town doesn't have the best medical facilities. There were some complications. I caught a strain of antibiotic-resistant Antonicebatter, and long story short, he imitated a chainsaw noise and gestured like he were cutting off his own leg, then took a sip of root beer. What do you know about this cult? I wanted to watch his face for any kind of a tell, but this time, if there were any reactions, he was keeping a lid on it. Not much. A dozen or so attractive millennials joined up with some charismatic personality. He recruited them from all over using the internet. Promised enlightenment and orgies. Didn't end so well. I heard Spencer Middleton was a part of this cult. Jack visibly shuddered at the mention of Middleton. Interesting. No, he answered. But it clearly wraps up the whole story nice and neat, doesn't it? You think Spencer's innocent? Jack laughed and shook his head. No, he's very much the opposite of innocent. I'm just saying he isn't exactly a team player. Outside the window, I saw a cruiser swing into the parking lot. Shit, running out of time. Look, I finally said. Some weird stuff's happened to me lately out in those woods. Things I can't exactly explain. And I'd like nothing more than to fall asleep for a couple of weeks and recharge, but I can't right now. I think there's something wrong with this town, and I think Vanessa got caught up in it. And I think maybe, just maybe, you know what's going on. Why would you think that? The deputy's about to come busting in here. She seems awfully protective of you. The door opened and O'Brien scanned the place, spotting us immediately. Jack still had his back to her and said, "You're not wrong. Weird things happen here, but you're looking in the wrong place. Vanessa wasn't a part of the cultists. They died before she went missing." "How do you know the cultists died? I thought they were only missing." "That's enough questions for now, Nail Polish," said O'Brien as she put a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You good, Crutches?" she asked him. "Peachy," he answered. If there had been any doubt, that had taken it away. There was something going on with Jack and O'Brien. Maybe she was just protecting him. Maybe they were working together. Maybe they were hooking up. I didn't know. But it was damn near impossible to get a look inside his head. And the one thing I took away from that interaction was this. I believed him. He knew more about the cult than he was letting on, and Vanessa wasn't part of it. So that put me close to square one. I had a meeting with Roger in 7 hours and time to burn. The sobering fact that I had killed a man that morning in self-defense was burning in the back of my mind, and I knew that when the time came, I would have to deal with that. But this was not that time. This was the time to play through the pain. There would be a chance for a nervous breakdown after I find Vanessa or her killer. Jamie looked pretty shocked to see me. I didn't feel like explaining anything, so I just asked him to put 2 pots of boiling water and to find me some rubbing alcohol, floss, and a sewing kit. He's a good kid, and I hate to keep traumatizing him, but I couldn't go to the hospital, just in case. Once the pots were boiling, I dropped a sewing needle into one and my car keys into another. I knew better than most how easy it was to bug anything these days. Even my wallet was going to stay in the console of my car until I could get back home and order new credit cards. It was going to be nothing but cash from here on out. My nephew didn't question it for a second when I told him I was going to be driving Vanessa's Honda for the rest of the time I was in town. I couldn't afford the very likely possibility that my car had been bugged. He didn't ask too many questions, and I didn't volunteer too many answers. The furthest he got was, "Why are your nails red?" I have no idea. I strung some floss through the needle and bent it into a hook shape. This was going to hurt if I did it right, and hurt even worse if I did it wrong. At that moment, I wondered if it might actually be worth the spiders to keep from feeling the pain I was about to feel. I ripped off the duct tape cast one layer at a time, all the way down to the base. Then I peeled back the final layer to see a grisly X-shaped wound on my leg. Just when I thought nothing could surprise me anymore, I'm proven wrong. Son of a bitch. Somehow, someone had beat me to the punch. The wound was very neatly stitched up, almost professionally. The work was so clean, it wouldn't leave but minimal scarring. Next to it, under the dried layer of blood, I could make out shaky handwriting where someone had drawn on my leg with a black marker. Jerry was here. I set the needle on the table and asked Jamie if they had any old antibiotics in the house. "Yeah, probably." "I'm gonna need all of them." It's amazing the difference a shower and clean clothes can make. I popped a handful of painkillers, the over-the-counter kind, and took apart one of Donnie's old speakers to get the magnet. I'm not saying that I think Marlboro stitched a tracker or a listening device into my leg wound, because that would be crazy. I'm just saying I ran a few passes of the extra strong magnet over the stitches, just to be safe. Next, I went into Vanessa's room and stood for a silent moment, taking it in, trying to find the balance between respecting her privacy and tearing apart the place to look for clues. There was still plenty of time before my meeting, but right then I was kicking myself for all the time I had wasted getting shit-faced, when there were all these answers out there to be found. I did a quick mental recap of where I stood. Facts. This town had a weird secret. Someone powerful enough to make a flipped truck and 3 bodies disappear in the span of a couple hours was screwing with me. Someone knew how to imitate my brother, lure me into a bizarre trap out in the woods, but why? The sheriff's department was only pretending to look into Vanessa's disappearance. The cult was just a cover story. Was Vanessa even involved in any of this? I was swimming through questions without any answers, when I heard Jamie say, "Hey, Uncle Eric?" I snapped out of my daze and turned to see Jamie standing in the doorway. "Yeah, kiddo?" "You have a visitor." He was waiting for me in the living room when I first walked in. At first, I didn't recognize him. A short man with bad posture and thick glasses. He looked nervous when he saw me and muttered a simple, "Hey, detective." It took me a few seconds before I recognized him as the janitor from the school. "Hey, Roger, I thought we weren't meeting until later." He shook his head and, in an exasperated voice, said, No, I'm not. Could you please not do that?" "Do what?" "My name is Peter Cole." I looked at Jamie and said, "Do you mind giving us a minute?" Jamie nodded and left towards his bedroom. I took a chair and invited Peter to do the same. After he sat down and taken a moment to calm down, I asked him my questions. "What's up, Peter? What are you doing at my brother's kid's house? Should I be concerned?" Peter took off his glasses and wiped his eyes, forcing back tears. I didn't know exactly how to react, but I assumed time would tell, so I waited until he was ready to answer. After a few moments, he managed to get it together enough to say, "I really don't think I should be here. If he finds out I came to talk to you." "If who finds out?" "Roger. Who else?" "Ah, for fuck's sake." "Look, Peter, is there a reason you're here? Because I'm still trying to figure out what actually happened to my niece, and bullshit distractions like this aren't helping." "You can't trust him." "Who?" "Roger. He acts like he's working for the common good, but in reality, he's just a manipulator. He only cares about himself, and these favors he's collecting aren't what you'd expect. He hurts people. He can't be stopped." I took a deep breath and rubbed my temples. "Look, Peter, I'm not interested in role-playing or whatever the hell this is. Roger is a puppet, a toy, an inanimate object. If you've got some kind of anxiety or whatever, and can only communicate through the doll, then that's fine. You do you. But I've actually got shit to do. So unless you want to tell me whatever it was that Roger found out in Vanessa's case, then please kindly get the fuck out of this house." Peter stood up, muttering something about being sorry for wasting my time, and left. I felt defeated. Another dead end. The only thing left to do was start over. I took apart Vanessa's room piece by piece, and spent a couple hours on her laptop. There was nothing out of the ordinary to be found in either case. Her cell phone was still plugged in next to her bed, but locked with a passcode. I made a few guesses using birthdays, but nothing worked. She was too smart for that anyway. I pocketed her cell with the intention of mailing it back to my guy in New Orleans, the one who could break into anything if the money's right, and I'd already decided to make that my priority number 1. She didn't keep a diary, or a day planner, or anything that could have given me an idea of where to start. Her sock drawer had a stash of cash in the corner, about $350 in 10s and 20s, and a dime bag of pot. A post-it note near her bed had her most recent work schedule. Everything on her laptop was password protected, using a master password manager program. She was smart, but that's a level of caution I would categorize as paranoia. I had only seen that level of behavior in one other person, me, and I deal with some pretty sensitive stuff by profession. Her Facebook settings wouldn't let me see any of her posts, but Jamie was able to view her friends list on his account. I cross-referenced names with the school database, and under an hour, I had a checklist planned for the day. It was going to be difficult running these people down without the access to a phone. Never mind the fact that I'm a grown man trying to convince a bunch of teenagers to sit down and have a Q&A. Frankie was a tall, homely girl, and the best I could tell, Vanessa's best friend. I found her at the local pizza place where she worked and convinced her to give me a few moments of her time. She mostly corroborated what I already knew. Vanessa was saving up money, planning to move out of town, didn't have any secrets worth sharing, wasn't seeing anybody. But what? But she had this glow about her. Like, I knew there was somebody. They went out a few times, not like a date or anything, and she didn't really want to talk about it. Then a couple of weeks ago, it went away. Like they broke up, but not like they were even really official anyway, you know? Guy, girl, did you get a name? Any idea where they were from? No, she didn't think it was serious enough to talk about, I guess. They met online, I think. I caught her ex-boyfriend Brian as he was getting off his shift at the local garage. He was in a bit of a hurry to get to the deer stand, but agreed to answer a few quick questions. I asked about the mystery person in Vanessa's life, but Brian informed me that he absolutely didn't give any fucks about what she was up to since the breakup. What an asshole. But there wasn't any impression that he was lying. I found Hammonds, her English teacher, the one she had friended on Facebook, at his home on the other side of town. He was all too happy to cooperate. If it weren't for his rock-solid alibi on the night of her disappearance, taking his kids to see their dying grandmother the next day over, I might have been tempted to play things differently, but it quickly became clear that he had nothing to hide. He showed me the letter of recommendation that he had written for Vanessa's batch of college applications. We spent a few minutes talking and drinking coffee. He agreed that the cult story was bullshit, but he had heard some rumors going around school that she was seeing someone new. Of course, a middle-aged, overweight English teacher wasn't exactly the key holder of information when it came to students' personal lives. It wasn't a total waste, though, as he pointed me to my next lead, Morgan Hardy. According to Hammonds, everyone knew Morgan had a thing for Vanessa. He was an awkward kid, a year younger than her, but he still asked her out on more than one occasion, and was turned down on more than one occasion. He wasn't on her list of friends, but Hammonds knew where I could find him. There weren't any cars in the driveway at Morgan's house. I knocked and rang the doorbell, then waited around 5 minutes and circled around back and broke in through an open window. I didn't have time to play it legal, and besides, this was hardly the worst thing I've done all day. It wasn't hard trying to figure out which bedroom was his. There was an oversized Fight Club poster thumbtacked to the closed door like an edgy teenager beacon. I pushed it open and immediately realized that I wasn't in Kansas anymore. There was a mirror on the wall covered with pictures of Vanessa. Some looked like they were taken off of social media, and others looked like they were snapped from a voyeur's point of view. The pictures continued, all over the walls, thumbtacked in random intervals at more or less eye level. The room was a mess. Clothes, books, dishes stuck wherever they would fit, which made the search all the more difficult. I checked in the obvious places and hit gold right off the bat. Under his mattress next to a one-hitter and a baggie of weed was a girl's yellow t-shirt. A match for the one Vanessa wore when she was last seen. I could hear Morgan's car blaring that god-awful excuse for music as he pulled in the driveway, giving me plenty of time to sneak away the way I had come in. But that's the last thing in the world I wanted to do. Instead, I closed the bedroom door and waited for him in his closet, with the door cracked just enough for me to see out. I needed to see him before he saw me. I needed to see his reaction to know for sure. It didn't take long for him to get inside. He shut the bedroom door behind him and made a beeline straight for his computer desk, but stopped halfway and muttered, "What the fuck?" He was taller than I expected, with at least an inch on me. Long, greasy black hair and the beginnings of a patchy beard. Where he stood, he had his back to me. By the time he turned around, there I was with my gun pointed right at him, ready for the kill shot. He fell to the ground, covering his face, screaming, "Oh, please, man! Oh, God, don't hurt me, please!" "Shut up!" I yelled at him. "What do you want? Oh, God, dude, just take whatever you want, but please don't hurt me." That was the last thing he said before he started sobbing. "Phone. Give me your phone." What? He blubbered. "Now!" "Sorry." He dug the phone out of his pocket and held it out for me. "Put it on the bed," I yelled. He nodded and tossed the phone onto his dirty, unmade mattress. I kept the gun locked on his forehead and walked over to grab it. "Why did you put all these—" "Shut up!" I screamed, rushing over to the spot where he had collapsed into a pathetic heap and smacking him across the face with my weapon. It worked. He shut right the hell up. But just to make sure, I pressed the tip of my gun against his face and put the fear of God into him. "If you say one more word, just one more single word to me, I'll paint these walls red. Not if you understand." He understood and closed his eyes and fell onto his side in the fetal position, crying. I felt awful doing this to the poor kid, but it was the only way to convince whoever set this whole thing up that I was buying their little fabrication. He had almost ruined it asking why I had put up so many pictures of Vanessa. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I would have to be a complete moron to see an orgy of evidence like this and believe it. When I first came into town, I made it a point to look up and memorize the sheriff's personal cell phone number for just such a situation as this. I picked up Morgan's phone off the bed and dialed. Clyde answered, and I'm sure he was confused as hell when I explained that I had found Vanessa's killer and told him where he could find Morgan. The look on the kid's face when I first walked into the room proved that he had no idea where all these pictures had come from. But the whole thing was so nice and neat. The perfect, horrible ending to this story, complete with a villain, motive, and a resolution that would satiate any pain-in-the-ass detective asking too many questions. He told me to stay put, and I lied and promised him I would. 5 minutes later, I was in the Honda, driving as fast as I could without raising any suspicion and trying to decide where the hell I was actually going. The story was now taking shape in the worst possible way. Vanessa had to be tied to the town's secrets somehow. Whatever entity set me up this morning and made the truck disappear was now adapting their strategy, offering me a way out. All I had to do was take it. But I'd already decided that there was nothing that was going to make me stop until I either figured out what happened to Vanessa or I was 6 feet under. I tried to think while I drove aimlessly around that shithole of a town, but couldn't come up with anything actually worthy of calling a plan. After a few minutes on the back roads, I came up to an old mom-and-pop hardware store and remembered what Peter told me earlier, vis-a-vis Roger, about them framing me for some kind of open case in town. After what I had seen, I had no doubt that his warning was genuine. So I decided to cover my ass and pulled into an empty parking lot and go shopping. 30 minutes later, I had a Boy Scout basket of supplies for nearly any situation. Duct tape, pipe cleaner, rope, pliers, hammer, gloves, flashlight, JB weld, and various other odds and ends. When it comes to the unknown, there's no such thing as overprepared. It was already getting dark by the time I left the store, and I made the mistake of feeling optimistic. That didn't last too long. I saw a figure sitting in the passenger seat of Vanessa's Honda right away. There was no mistaking him. The figure, dressed in all camo, green paint smeared on his face, staring forward with a lifeless gaze. A million thoughts crashed their way through my mind at once, but by some miracle, I managed to grab onto the only one that mattered. Be calm, be rational, think this through. Facts. Use the facts. There was a man sitting in my car, waiting for me. Looks exactly like, what's his name? Ned. But he died earlier today. I checked. How long was I inside? Half an hour? How did they find me? How did they sneak the body into the car without me noticing, and why? Why? Of course I knew why. I couldn't take any chances. Even if Morgan fell for Vanessa's disappearance, I still had a loose end, which means this is a setup. Which means the police will be here any second. Think, think, think. Now, options, go. I could run, flee the scene, call it in later that the car was stolen, but by now it would be covered in my DNA, and if they found the dead body, it would get linked back to me. What kind of story could I tell in defense? I literally killed him, so the truth was out. Nah, forget that. Next option. Get in the car and gun it. Anywhere. Leave fucking town if I need to. I can drop the body in the parking lot and no. The old man working the cash register will tie me to this place. Okay, take the body with me. The cops will pull you over. Then how do you explain this? Well, the cops aren't here yet, so that leaves me with one option. I dropped my things and raced to the trunk of the car, popped it open. Then, opened the car door and checked to make sure. Yep, he was just as dead as the last time I saw him. The only difference was now he had a bullet hole in his forehead. Whoever put him in the seat made it a point to splatter blood all over the dash and carpet, but I didn't have the luxury of time. This was going to need to be fast and messy. I yanked him out of the seat and dragged him over my shoulder around the back. I shoved him into the truck and slammed it shut with just a second to spare before the deputy's cruiser pulled into the parking lot. I took a few deep breaths and tried to steady my nerves. Then, when that wasn't working, I lit a cigarette and backed to where I dropped my things. Evening, Mr. Riggin. I tried not to look guilty as fuck when I turned to face the rookie deputy that I had just met yesterday. Franklin, right? As I picked up my purchases and started for the car. He followed behind me. Sure is a small town, huh, deputy? It sure is, he said. I opened the back door and put the bags on the seat, keeping it casual and cool. I leaned against the car and slowly continued to smoke the coffin nail. Then offered one to Franklin, who shook his head and said, "Nah, I'm okay. Been quit for 5 years." I put the pack away and said, "You're a better man than me." After a second, I could see Franklin was getting nervous, trying to look over my shoulder into the car. "Something wrong, Franklin?" I asked point blank. Nah, we're good." His poker face was just as bad today. "Well," I said, "any new developments with Middleton? I know you're not supposed to say anything, but off the record. Does it look like he's any closer to cracking?" "I doubt it." I finished my smoke and put the cherry out on the heel of my boot, then tucked the butt back into the cigarette pack as Franklin watched. "Look, I'm flattered by the attention, but something tells me you're not here for my world-class conversation skills. Something on your mind?" Franklin finally relaxed and let out a laugh. "You got me. Somebody called into the station to say there were a man outside the hardware shop trying to sell drugs out of the trunk of a Honda." I returned his laugh. "No shit. They say what he looked like?" Franklin went on to describe me to a T, down to the black scrapes on my face. Franklin and I shared another laugh. "Guess I better get going," I said, "before anyone gets the wrong idea, huh?" "Yeah, but real quick, why don't you let me take a look inside your trunk? Just so I can put it in my report, huh?" I shook my head and said, "Sorry, Franklin. You'll have to put in your report that I refuse to open it without a warrant. You know, it's a principle kind of thing." Franklin nodded and said, "Well, I guess you better be going then, huh?" I felt a deep sense of relief that only lasted for half a second before the radio on Franklin's belt crackled to life with the sound of a loud and urgent voice.
"All units, be on the lookout for a Honda Accord. Plate number."
Then went on to describe Vanessa's license plate.
"Be advised, the driver is Eric Riggin. He is likely armed."
I tried to laugh again, but Franklin started reaching for his gun, so I put a right hook across his cheek hard enough to drop him and split my knuckle open. It wasn't enough to knock him out, though, but his head hit the concrete and he started groaning. I went straight for his gun, wrestled it free from his belt, and pitched it onto the roof of the store. Then, while he was still regaining his bearings, I took the cuffs out and put one on his left wrist before he snapped back into action and jumped on top of me, throwing wild punches and screaming. He was a terrible fighter, and relying entirely on adrenaline. I guarded my face until he tired himself out, then grabbed him by the wrist and gave him a solid kick to the side of the knee. He dropped again and I put him on his stomach and twisted his arms behind his back just enough to connect the handcuffs. Boom. I jumped to my feet and turned to see where the sound had come from. It was the old man with white hair, the cashier from inside the hardware store. He was standing there with a shotgun in his hands aimed in the air. "Now that was just a warning shot," he said with a slight quiver in his voice. "Next one's for you if you don't let him go right now." As he said that, he pointed the gun at me. "That's a Hatfield break-action shotgun," I said. "Yeah, so what?" he answered back, trying to sound intimidating but failing. "So, I'm not an idiot, old man. That thing is a single shot, and you just fired your entire payload with that warning." He trembled slightly but refused to lower his weapon. So, I gave him a little incentive, pulling out my own piece and aiming it right back at him. This one, however, has plenty of warning shots left in it. He tossed his shotgun down and held his hands up and made his way to his knees. Good, I said as I circled around the front of Vanessa's car. That idiot's gunshot would be attracting every bored law enforcement officer or agent in the whole damn town. I needed to get somewhere else, fast. I don't know what made me change my mind about going to the meeting with Roger. I had pretty much decided that if the mentally unstable man who could only talk through a puppet was my only hope, then I was pretty much fucked anyway. But here I was, sitting outside the bowling alley, waiting to go inside to see what, if anything, he had to offer. I showed up early and decided to do a few circles around the building to see if anyone else was there. No sign of cars or activity, and from the looks of it, the place had been shut down for at least a decade. I would be surprised if they even had power inside. All I could think was that this was a nice place to get murdered. I took the pipe cleaner while I waited and used it to scrape up the inside of my gun barrel. A trick I'd picked up from some more seedy contacts I had back in the city. If they had found any way to tie my gun to the body currently rotting in the trunk of Vanessa's car, this would make ballistic fingerprinting impossible. Wow, I thought to myself. I'm gonna have to figure out how to ditch this body. One step at a time. That was a problem for later. Right now, I had to figure out who was pulling all these strings. Nobody had shown up by 8. At 8:05, I decided to break into the bowling alley. What's one more felony on a night like this, anyway? The back door was open when I tried it, so I slipped inside with my flashlight in one hand and my other firmly gripping my gun at my waist. The whole place smelled like a decaying carpet, and the air was thick with dust. I followed the hallway into the main lobby, where I heard a familiar voice of a puppet speaking to me from somewhere in the darkness. Well, 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 detective. You've certainly been busy today, haven't you? You know, if this whole private eye thing doesn't work out, I think you got a great career in terrorism. Peter? I said. Where are you? A figure emerged from the other side of the room, and once again, it was not what I was expecting. I could see the familiar wooden puppet staring at me, and it came closer and closer. But the person carrying him was not the same man that was in my family's living room earlier that day. Roger was being held and operated by a grossly overweight young woman with tan skin and pigtails. She stared at Roger while he said in the same voice he always used, "Who the hell is Peter? Were you expecting a friend? 'Cause I distinctly remember telling you to come alone." I shined my flashlight in the girl and said, "Who's this? Who are you?" She covered her eyes with one hand and used the other to work the doll, saying, "Don't mind her. This is Tristessa. I had to find a new host after the janitor went on his little episode." A new host? Here, you're gonna want to take this. He spun his head to the side and facing the girl, Tristessa, and giving her a nod. That must have been her cue to pull a cell phone out of her pocket and offer it to me, which I accepted. I know you're smart enough to have figured it out by now, but your old phone is bugged to here to hell and back. Keep this on so I can reach you when I need to. It was uncanny. Her lips were absolutely not moving. The doll, I concluded, must be voiced remotely somehow, and the girl was somehow moving his lips along with the words perfectly. This was insane. Alright, where exactly are you, Roger? I'd love to know who I'm really dealing with. Roger let out a gleeful cackle and said, "Well, we rarely know who we're talking to. Don't you agree? Look, I bet you have a ton of questions, but I only have time to share the important stuff. You'll have to figure the rest out on your own. If you're not comfortable with this arrangement, then you can beat your feet right now, because the only answers I'm giving you are about Vanessa, as per our original deal." I shook my head and said, "Whatever, let's stick to the plan. What is it you found?" "It's not what I found, detective." Roger turned his head to Tristessa and nodded again, signaling her to hand me a thick manila folder labeled V. Riggin. I took it and started thumbing through. Roger, or whoever was really controlling Roger, had compiled an amazingly extensive list. Her background, childhood, family, report cards, school essays, her entire life cataloged in these pages. It was impressive work. I stopped on a page that said passwords, followed by a list. How did you get her passwords? It was pretty easy, really. You just need to know the answers to some very basic security questions. Mother's maiden name, childhood best friend, favorite color, first pet. What's the point of having a secure password if the password keep is so easy to work around? I scanned the list until I found a 6-digit code labeled CEL. Then suddenly felt the urge to change all of my passwords and move off the grid permanently. Alright, I said. You say it's not about what you found. Care to elaborate? He continued. In 1604, a star exploded, creating the Kepler supernova. It was reported and recorded far and wide, all over the planet. A brand new star in the night sky. This was a big deal. Religions claimed it was proof of their gods. Musicians wrote songs about it. Folks lost their frickin' minds. Enough that we're still talking about it now, 400 years later. People spend their lives trying to find a new object out there in the void. But what's funny to me is that in the last decade, dozens of stars have disappeared. It's just remarkable a phenomenon, isn't it? The starry night is still irrevocably changed, but no one tells stories when something old goes away. Only when something new shows up. I wonder what that says about mankind. So you're saying the key isn't finding something that shouldn't be there, but finding something that should be there, but isn't. Bingo. Now you're starting to sound like a detective. Okay, I said, holding the folder. You want to tell me what should be in here? The mom. I looked at the girl Tristessa for any kind of emotion, but I couldn't get a read on her. And I sure as hell wasn't going to look for expressions on a puppet. What about her? She has almost no footprint. She's a rock that falls into a pond and makes no ripples. Where is she? Why isn't she raising hell trying to find her missing daughter? I put the folder under my arm and fished out my smokes, lighting one up before answering. You seem to know a lot. Do you know what Capgras delusion is? As a matter of fact, I don't. But please, I live to learn. Capgras delusion is a mental condition where you think someone you know, someone you love, has been replaced. Vanessa's mother had it. Bad. She would tell me shit like, I know it looks and acts like her, it talks and smells just like her, but this thing isn't my Vanessa. Nothing anyone would do could convince her otherwise. Just something wrong with the way her neurons fired. Wow, that's messed up. Yeah. He didn't say anything for a while after that. I took the time to finish my smoke. When I was finally done and I asked, was that it? Detective, I don't think you realize the gravity of what you just told me. Oh, really? Yes, this is the key to the whole thing. This is why they chose Vanessa. They've done an amazing job hiding her mother to the point where even I can't find her name anywhere. Wait, I said. Back up 1 second. What do you mean by this is why they chose Vanessa? What do you know that I don't know? Somewhere far behind me came the sound of metal scraping. A door had just been pushed open. Ah, shit, said Roger in a hushed tone. Do you smell that? They sent one of those things here. How did they find us, detective? I know you weren't stupid enough to get bugged, were you? I turned off my flashlight and pulled out my gun and pointed it at the direction the noise came from. Fuck you, I whispered. How do I know you didn't bring someone? It was nearly pitch black in there, but I could smell it. A gag-inducing something abysmal, like rotting meat and petrified shit. It came closer with the sound of heavy footsteps. I could hear it breathing, loudly, like a guttural animal growl. Detective, there are 3 exits behind us. Our best shot at getting out of here alive is to split up and go. For once, I was already on the same page. I made a mental note of the closest way out before we had even started talking. And I had already started running by the time I heard Roger scream, "Now!" The thing, whatever it was, began running. I threw down Vanessa's folder and clicked on the flashlight as I bolted toward the side doors. I couldn't tell which direction the girl had gone, but that thing was right behind me, chasing straight after, and gaining. I hit the double doors full speed and they flung open, sending me falling down 3 steps on the other side and landing on the broken concrete, before spinning onto my back and pointing the gun at the empty doorway behind me. Whatever had been there now vanished, and I didn't feel inclined to wait and see where it had gone. I got back to the car and peeled out of there, part of me wanting to hit the interstate and never look back. But the stronger part of me realized how pathetic of a move like that would be. What was that thing back there? Some kind of hitter? It seems they changed the plan after the frame-up job went south. Now, they're just trying to do a good old-fashioned murder. I knew I wouldn't last long on the road with a bolo on the car, and I couldn't head back to Jamie's just yet because police would be watching. I'd run out of good options a while back, but it wasn't until I drove past a bar that I saw was open that I realized how desperate I was. I've helped bounty hunters track down dirtbags on a few occasions, and it never ceases to amaze me how stupid people can be when they're on the lam. If they had only kept their heads down, laid low, they wouldn't have been caught. If it were me, was the way I started plenty of thoughts back then. If you had told me weeks ago what I was about to do, I'd have thought you were crazy. I could never be that stupid. I pulled into the bar's parking lot and parked right next to the thing that had caught my attention from the road in the first place. The sheriff's deputy cruiser was parked backwards in a spot. I checked the plates to make sure, and I was right. This was the same cruiser I had been inside earlier that day. I walked inside and scanned the room. A small, poorly lit place with a ripped-up pool table, broken jukebox, deer heads on every wall, and country music playing overhead, while a couple barflies sat on their stools, watching something on television in silence. The bartender was a frumpy old gal who looked like she didn't know how to smile. She was leaning against the bar with her arms crossed, wearing a blue jean jacket with the sleeves cut off. And in the far corner, at a small table by herself, O'Brien was looking at something on her cell phone. I went straight to the bar and made my order. I'll take one of whatever that woman in the corner is drinking. The bartender looked at me and gave me a disapproving face and said, "Anything for you?" "I'll take a Jack and Coke. Hold the Jack. I'm the DD tonight." She rolled her eyes and made up the order. 1 soda, 1 dark beer. Then said, "You know, it ain't none of my business, but you and her don't gee-haw, hun. It might not be PC or whatever, but race mixing is wrong. That's just my 2 cents. In the midst of all this crazy shit that had gone on that day, I had almost forgotten how much I hated this fucked up, shitty small town. But nothing like a fresh dose of old-fashioned racism to remind me. She put the drinks in front of me and I dropped some cash on the bar next to them and said, "You're right, it isn't any of your business." I placed a beer in front of her and took a seat, waiting anxiously to find out if I'd made another mistake. O'Brien looked up from her phone and gave me an icy stare. I returned the look with a smile, which was probably the biggest and stupidest gamble I'd made since showing up in this shithole. But my gut told me that she wasn't one of them. And my gut had a pretty decent batting average, so here we were. She started laughing, instantly betraying how drunk she was. Okay, so far, so good. "Thanks, nail polish, but I'm an adult. I can get my own roofies." I just wanted to say thanks for driving me around earlier. "Well, aren't you a gentleman?" "No, of course not, I swear." She laughed again and put her phone away. This was the moment of truth. Was she going to arrest me, or... She finished the half-empty beer that sat in front of her, then put the glass down next to a couple empties, then grabbed the one I'd given her and took a healthy swig. I took a sip from my drink and waited for her to speak. "Any luck, detective?" "Lots. All of it bad." "And I suppose you expect your luck to change now?" "Well, it can't get much worse, can it?" I looked back at the bar and caught the woman there glaring at us in disgust. "Well, you can't say I didn't warn you. Thanks for the drink, but maybe you should get out of this town before someone with the inclination to arrest you figures out that you're at the local watering hole." "Someone like you, deputy?" "Definitely not someone like me. As you can plainly see," she gestured to all the empty glasses on the table, "I am off the clock. And while I'm off the clock, you can just call me Amelia. Look, I know this is going to sound pretty ballsy, but do you mind if I ask you a few questions?" She laughed out loud. It was a genuine, deep, drunken laugh. Made me realize that, under other circumstances, I would probably enjoy having a few drinks pissing the night away with Amelia O'Brien. "Sure, why not? But I get to ask you some questions too." "Seems fair." "So?" Is there a Mrs. Nail Polish? There was. A couple of times, actually. But there's just something about being a deadbeat husband that didn't really sit right with them. And I presume it was your brutal honesty that put the ladies off? Actually, that's one of my more charming attributes. She laughed again, and I relaxed a little. So what brings a city girl like you to a BFE town like this? Not sure. Sometimes I suspect I died and this is hell. That's a reasonable theory. You don't need to circle around the questions with me, Riggin. I know what you want to ask. What's going on here? Well, I can't help you, because I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. I showed up a month ago, and every night I go to sleep thinking the next day couldn't possibly be weirder. And every day, I'm proven wrong. You can call me Eric. I'm not going to do that, Manny Petty. But if you let me bum a smoke, I'll tell you whatever I know. It's not like it's gonna help you any. I fished out 2 cigarettes, lit hers for her between her lips. After the first drag, she coughed and laughed and put it out. She clearly wasn't a smoker. I know this is probably hard to understand, but I didn't sleepwalk off into the forest this morning. I got a phone call from someone claiming to be my brother. The only thing is, he's been dead for 4 years. Then I heard something in the woods. It's actually hard to explain. But when I was out there, the air started to heat up. It's like I was being boiled alive. She was listening to all of this, attentively. And so far, I hadn't lost her. I'd considered finishing the story, but knew that the truth was too much right now. Even if she bought it, no good could come from her knowing about the dead rednecks and the missing truck. You know what? I believe you. Because when I first started, there was about a week straight where the office was flooded from calls from the locals saying that they were being contacted by their dead loved ones. We figured it was just a bunch of kids playing a prank, but it didn't take long to figure out that no, something was really happening, on a huge scale. Grandma Gertrude called to tell little Timmy that she didn't know where she was, but they got her. They put her brain in a jar or some bullshit. Really freaked people out. Then, one day, I got the order to drop the whole thing, and I'm warned not to talk about it. I put up a little resistance, but they saddled me with gas station duty. The rest is history. She took another big swig and put down her half beer before continuing. You know what a heat burst is? No, but I think I gather from the name of it that there's going to be an official explanation for what happened out in those woods. You stick around here for too long, you'll notice a pattern. No matter what happens, no matter how insane, there will always be an official explanation. Nothing supernatural ever happens. A heat burst is a rare weather phenomenon that occurs around these parts. Sometimes, temperatures will spike to 100, 120, or more, for no good reason. You want to know why I know that? I shrugged. They were talking about it on the radio, last week. Last week. That's a pretty weird coincidence, don't you think? But what else could it be? You'd think someone knew I'd be listening to the radio a week ago, and wanted to make sure I'd have the story loaded up to tell you tonight, just in case you were sitting here, thinking, I wonder if something supernatural is going on. My smoke was spent, so I put it in the ashtray and tried to think of what to say. Then, I felt something in my pocket vibrate. I pulled out the phone Roger had given me and read the text message. Triss is dead. That thing got her. I'm going to find a new host. Stay safe. I made a mental note to pour one out for the poor girl later on. If she were really dead. That was a damn shame. And I wanted nothing more than to find the person responsible and kick his teeth in. But just like the pain in my leg and the shock of dodging death by inches more than once, I would have to put this thought into a compartment somewhere deep in my mind and let it stay until after. After what? Hell, I didn't even know. Look, Riggin, I'm just as hot for malicious compliance as the next girl, but I can't exactly aid and abet a fugitive. I'm going to the little girl's room, and you're going to be gone by the time I get back. And then, maybe after I finish this drink, I'm gonna call Clyde and tell him you stopped by. You think that'll give you enough time to get on the road and head towards the home of the best lawyer you know? Yeah, I could do that. But here's the thing. There's always a thing, isn't there? You're not gonna like this, but I'm gonna need a huge favor. I was right. She didn't like it. In the center of town, there's an old cemetery connected to the Baptist church. Behind it, there's a service trail leading off into the woods, which connects to a dilapidated caretaker's cottage that's been out of commission since the 50s. When I was in school, it was a popular place for kids to sneak away and make out or get high. I had a hard time imagining teens slipping back there these days, now that the forest has swallowed up any semblance of civilization. The path was overgrown and narrow, with low tree branches reaching out like claws from the giant forest, scratching the car on both sides as I slowly drove down. I pulled O'Brien's cruiser to the back deep enough that no one would spot it off the main road, killed the lights and the engine, then got to work. I used the passcode I gleaned from Vanessa's file to get inside her phone, started with emails and texts. Not too much to see, but there was a long conversation chain with someone named Toulouse. They had started chatting a couple of months ago. Vanessa: I had a good time yesterday. Looking forward to our next hangout sesh. Toulouse: wow, desperate much? Vanessa: LOL, kiss my ass. I'm trying to pay you a compliment. Toulouse: what the hell is a compliment? Some kind of sandwich? Vanessa: God, you're so weird. Wanna come over and play Smash Bros tonight? Toulouse: can't, got a thing. It's super mysterious yet important as fuck. Vanessa: sounds interesting. Can I have a hint? Toulouse: gotta help a guy get rid of some bodies. Vanessa: well, when you're done, come play Smash Bros. And bring beer. I'll spare you the gritty details, but there were a few times when I had to put the phone down and roll my eyes. Is this how kids flirt these days? Toulouse seemed mostly harmless, but immature even by teenager standards. I honestly couldn't tell what Vanessa saw in him or her. But there's no accounting for taste, and Toulouse made her type lol enough times that she must have enjoyed his company. There was nothing overtly sexual in their messages, just a strong overtone of two horny kids trying to figure themselves out. I felt like such a creep, but then reminded myself that this is what I do for a living: stalking couples, waiting for cheaters to get busy, then stealing some photos while they were going at it. The only difference was that I knew the person whose life I was digging into. But even still, I couldn't shake that nagging feeling that this felt wrong. Vanessa and Toulouse's texts weren't as expositional as I'd hoped. A whole lot of "see you tomorrows" gave me the impression that Toulouse was from work. A couple "I had fun last nights" told me that they had gone out for some not dates. A couple emojis back and forth reminded me of how out of touch I was with this generation. Then the whole thing ended abruptly with a few messages from Vanessa. Hey, what you doing? You there? I'm bored. Wanna hang? Hello? I guess you're not talking to me anymore, huh? Toulouse: lose my number. Vanessa: WTF, what the hell did I do? Toulouse: Vanessa was a friend of mine, douchebag. Vanessa: I should have listened to everyone when they said there was something wrong with your brain. You are an asshole. Toulouse: sorry, my bad. Autocorrect. What I meant to say was, Vanessa was a friend of mine. You twat waffle McFuckface. That's how it ended. The date of the last message put the conversation at about a week before her disappearance. I saved Toulouse's number on the burner I got from Roger and made a plan to track down the line when I had a moment's reprieve. The next step was checking her phone for pictures. I opened up the gallery and scrolled down a ways, started flicking through the slides chronologically. Vanessa was a normal teenage girl, and she took what I considered a normal amount of selfies, one for every day or so. I studied them, looking for any sort of clue or indicator that something was wrong, or about to go wrong. But she was always happy, always wearing the same old brown jacket, with that typical teenage girl smile. I had to smile when I first saw it, the jacket. I recognized it as the one Donnie used to wear all the time. It was a little too big on her, but she made it work. Starting around a month back, there were more frequent pictures of her, 4 or 5 for each day. Not selfies though. Somebody else was taking these pictures of her with her phone, while she looked back and laughed. The last picture on her phone was taken an entire week before she had gone missing. 2 days before her breakup text with Toulouse. And that picture was the only one I needed to see. Motherfucker. The last photo showed her and Toulouse, cheek to cheek, smiling in a shared selfie. I recognized the guy she was with instantly. When I had met him the day before, he said he didn't really know her that well. Only back then, I knew him as Jerry, and I was quickly running out of reasons not to beat the shit out of this guy. I lit a smoke to calm my nerves, then I remembered I wasn't in my own car, and O'Brien might not be too merciful if she got the car back smelling like tobacco. So I rolled my window down, and that's when I smelled it. The sour, putrid stench, the one from the bowling alley. I flicked on the headlights illuminating the forest path in front of me, but as far as I could see, it was empty. Then I heard it, stomping through the overgrowth of the trail behind me, walking towards the cruiser from the cemetery. Then I instantly realized why O'Brien always parked the car facing the road. I couldn't see what it was, but I could smell it from a mile away. The thing, whatever it was, kept walking, closer and closer. The outline of its shape taking form in the darkness. An unnatural juggernaut. Enormous, wide, dark, and dragging something behind it that scraped down the road with each step. From this distance, there was no way for me to make out exactly what I was dealing with. It was protected by shadows, and whatever the manner of monster it was, one thing was glaringly obvious. I did not want to be out here alone with it. I turned on the engine, then reached for the gear shift and heard the thing's feet slamming the ground as it sprinted down the path towards me with impossible speed. By the time I got the car in gear, it was there. The car rocked just as the back window shattered into pieces and the roof buckled. Suddenly, the front window erupted in a spiderweb of broken glass. I dropped my cigarette onto my lap and tried to figure out what the hell was going on. In the center of the smashed glass, a giant piece of metal wiggled and pulled itself free, then disappeared into the night sky. Then came right back down on the windshield again, with a loud impact that completely covered my field of vision in broken glass. The reality of the situation clicked into place and I screamed, "Ah, shit." That thing was standing on the roof of the cruiser swinging a giant mallet into the windshield, and by the looks of it, I didn't have long until there was nothing left between me and the hammerhead. Drive. I couldn't see anything in front of me, and even if I didn't have anywhere to go, the trail would dead end in the forest and I would be fucked. Reverse didn't feel like a much better option. The back window was busted out and there was no light to guide me. I'd pretty much be flying blind. There wasn't enough room to turn around, and I sure as shit wasn't going to leave this rapidly deteriorating safety of the vehicle. The piece of metal that had penetrated the laminated glass in front of my face started to budge. The thing was getting ready to pull it back for another swing. I made a split-second decision to kick the car into reverse and put the pedal to the floor. We lurched backwards and started flying down the trail, but somehow the thing on the roof didn't fall off. An enormous hand the size of a baseball glove reached down and wrapped its fingers around my open window. Giant, gray, inhuman digits gripped the roof just inches from my face. I could see the other hand on the opposite side as it smashed through the tempered glass of the passenger window. This titanic fuck was laying flat on the top of the car with an arm span wide enough to reach both sides of the windows at the same time. I kept my foot pressed hard on the gas while I yanked out my Beretta, pressed it against the roof, and fired off 3 shots. I would have fired a 4th, but the car bounced over a tombstone and we went into a quick spin. I yanked the wheel back, gaining control without ever dropping speed. I cleared the forest road and hit the cemetery. We were going over graves, colliding with markers, mowing over the smaller ones and ricocheting off the bigger ones. At one point, I ran over the back bumper, and before I knew it, we were through the ditch and on the main road. There were streetlights here. I could actually see the path in front of me. I swung the wheel again, fishtailing into a near-perfect 90-degree turn that pointed me straight down the line of the road. We climbed in speed, and in no time, I was redlining the RPMs. But that thing held firm onto the roof of the car. The road was about to run out, a sharp dead man's curve to the left, and despite my performance up to this point, I wasn't so sure I could hook another turn at these speeds in reverse gear. If I stayed the course, I was going to crash into another dense part of the forest, so I made a split-second decision. I picked up my gun and put it against the roof again, started shooting at the same moment I slammed on the brakes, sending us in a long skid, tires screeching against the road loud enough to wake the dead. That thing finally flew off the top of the car and landed somewhere between the trees and the ditch with a loud crash. I immediately pointed the gun back there and waited to see if it was going to get up. The only sounds were the unhealthy rattling of the cruiser engine and my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I still hadn't gotten a good look at it, but now I couldn't even tell where the thing was. "What are you doing? Get out of here." I turned in my seat and faced forward, then realized I couldn't see out of the window. The shattered laminated glass held in place was impossible to look through. I pointed my gun at it, then caught myself. That won't work. This isn't a fucking movie. So what are my options? There weren't any. I had to get that windshield out, or the car was useless. I put the cruiser in park, opened my door, and took a breath. I stepped out onto the road, bracing myself for another attack. That thing wasn't far away. I knew that much from the horrendous smell that continued to assault my senses. My gun wasn't about to leave my hand until I was at least 10 miles down the road. When a few seconds had passed, I finally turned my attention away from the forest and looked at the deputy's cruiser. It looked like I felt, beat to hell and back and running on fumes and prayers. The sides were scraped up and covered in dirt. The frame was dented to the point where any reasonable insurer would have totaled it twice over. But somehow, the engine was still running, and the car would still go. And right now, that's all I needed from it. Yeah, if I managed to survive all this, O'Brien was going to kill me. The mammoth mallet still sticking out of the windshield was a metal-gripped sledgehammer. I climbed out onto the hood of the car and grabbed the thick handle with my free hand and started pulling it until it came free from the glass. This wasn't going to be easy. The tool was a custom job. Steel pole, thick enough that I could barely fit a hand around it, was welded onto a square block of metal. A weapon for someone or something way stronger than me. Before too long, I realized that this heavy bastard was a two-handed job, and begrudgingly holstered my gun, for just a moment, while I put all my strength into yanking the hammer out of the glass and dragging it off the roof of the car. Without a doubt, the weapon weighed more than I did. On the bright side, the hole the sledgehammer left in the windshield was big enough that I could see through, and I didn't waste any time before putting some distance between me and that thing in the woods. I left the cruiser parked behind a daycare center a few blocks from Vanessa and Jamie's house, then made my way through backyards, praying there weren't any unchained pit bulls along the way. For once, luck was on my side, and I got to my brother's backyard without any hitches. I was annoyed to find the back door was unlocked. It was clear that Jamie was way too trusting to live in this town on his own. This just reinforced that I had made the right call in what I was about to do. "Hey kiddo," I yelled from the kitchen, suddenly realizing for the first time that I had fucked up my ears. I snapped my finger to the right of my head to confirm, and I was definitely deaf in that ear. He came out of his bedroom and took one look at me before saying, "You look like you've been in a fight." I turned my head slightly to point my good ear and responded, "You should see the other guy." Could be temporary, maybe not. It's weird I could make it this far without realizing I had fucked up my ears. Yeah, adrenaline really is a wonder drug. "We need to get out of town. Right now," I said. "What? Why?" "We don't have time to discuss it. I'll explain in the car. Get packed. Only what you need for the next 48 hours, understand? Leave your phone, leave any electronics. You got 30 seconds to pack, now move." "Uncle Eric, I don't think I can..." 28 seconds, did I stutter? He ran back to his room and I pulled out the burner phone Roger gave me and called O'Brien. She picked up on the first ring and said, "Yeah? I need you to do me a favor as soon as you can. Don't say I never did anything for you." She hung up and I crossed the living room over to the blinds and peeked out. The deputies sitting outside in the unmarked sedan couldn't have been more obvious if they tried. I could see Williams reclined in his front seat and playing a game on his cell. If this was all I was up against, I would be embarrassed if I got caught. But the real threat was still out there, and I have to give these guys the slip first. I watched as Williams got a call over the radio, sat up and answered before he pulled out of his spot and drove away, followed shortly by 2 other cars. O'Brien would have just called in the report. Shots fired at the high school. Eric Riggin had lost his mind and started trading lead. She was pinned down and needed backup. The distraction would give us more than enough time to slip out of there. I yelled toward Jamie's room, 10 seconds, kid, don't forget your jacket." That was the moment. The moment it all slipped into place for me. They say your subconscious keeps working on problems when they're in the back of your mind, even when you don't realize what you're actually looking for. It's not what's there, but shouldn't be. I had read the report on Vanessa more times than I could count. The night she disappeared was a cool one, and damn near every picture of her on that phone had one thing in common. She was always wearing Donnie's old brown jacket. Jamie came out of his room with his backpack slung over his shoulder and said, "Okay, I'm ready." "The night your sister went missing, you said she was wearing a yellow t-shirt." The question caught him by surprise. "Yeah, so? Was she wearing her jacket?" He shook his head and said, "No, I don't think so." "You don't think so? Or you're sure?" "I'm sure, I'm positive. She wasn't wearing Dad's jacket." His lip quivered and I got the sense that he was hiding something. "Jamie, look at me. Is there something from that night you're not telling me?" "No." He was lying. It was written all over his face. He stared at the floor and said, "Can we just go now?" I walked past him to Vanessa's room. We were spending precious seconds here, but this was important. I knew I was onto something, just not sure what it meant yet. What should be there, but isn't? I had already gone through every single thing in this room, but I needed to see if maybe I somehow missed it. Donnie's old jacket struck a nerve when I first saw the picture. I recognized it the moment I saw her wearing it. I would have had some kind of reaction if I seen it earlier, but I hadn't. Jamie came into the room while I was digging through clothes hung up in her closet. "What is it?" he asked. "Does your sister have laundry anywhere?" "No, she did a load the day before she went missing." "What about her jacket? Have you seen it anywhere? Do you know where it ended up?" "No, maybe she left it in her car." I knew for a fact that it wasn't in the car, and it wasn't in her room, and she wasn't wearing it when she disappeared. That thing clearly was more than just a piece of clothing to her. It looked stupid, but to her, she wore it to work every day anyway. So it had some kind of sentimental value to her. So where the hell was it? "Jamie, this is important. You sure you don't know where the jacket is?" "I swear, I have no idea. Why?" "Don't worry about it. We need to go. Now." We took the back roads, headed away from the school. Jamie was kind enough not to make a big deal of how junky the car had gotten, ignoring the fast food containers and empty bottles of liquor on the floor. I kept one eye on the mirror and waited till we were a few miles from his place before I started digging into that suspicious look he had given me earlier when I asked if there was more to the story. "Jamie, I need to ask you some more questions." "Okay, fine." The night Vanessa went missing. I know it's hard, but I need you to think back again and walk me through the whole thing. What was the first thing you remember that day? I don't know. Well, start with the night then. You were watching television. She came out of her room, didn't say a word, and walked right out the door. Is that correct? Yeah, that's what happened. Okay. What were you watching? I don't know. I don't remember. But you remember exactly what she was wearing? Yeah. That's a little weird. Your memory sure was being selective that night, huh? I hated this, but it had to be done. You can't treat him like family. He's a witness, and he's hiding something. So nut up and grill him. Look, I told you everything that was important. That was important? What aren't you telling me, kid? He was silent, so I slammed on the brakes and said, "Hey, tell me that secret you're keeping. I just spent the last 2 days getting the shit kicked out of me by every fucking weird thing in this town. The last thing I need is for my own blood to start lying to me too." "I'm not lying," he shouted back with tears in his eyes. "It just wasn't important, okay?" "Bullshit! I'll decide what's important. You just tell me the truth." Tears were running down his face as he said, "We had a fight, okay?" "About what?" "I don't even know. Just some stupid stuff. I thought she'd been acting weird, like there was something wrong with her. And then the last thing I said to her..." He lost it at this point. Sobbing into his hands, loud and ugly and real. It broke my heart, but I knew we were getting somewhere. "Look, I loved your dad, okay? And I know he loved me too. He was my sibling, and we used to get in fights all the time. Not just play fights. Something about growing up together gives you the ammo to really hit someone where it hurts. We could tear each other apart, but At the end of the day, we knew we were family. Nothing could change that. Your sister loved you, and an entire lifetime of being your big sis isn't going to get wiped out over one stupid fight. You don't understand, he sobbed. The last thing I said to her was that Mom was right. Shit. What did you mean by that? I told her I didn't really believe she was my sister. Then she left, and that's the last time anyone saw her. I think I made her... No, shut up. Don't you dare say that. Don't you even think it. Your sister was smarter than me. She didn't do anything. You didn't make her do anything. Somebody took her, and when I find out who, I'm going to make them pay. Do you still think she's alive? I didn't answer. I just started driving again and watched the road. What in the ever-loving fuck is this? O'Brien yelled as I stood in her doorway with Jamie by my side. We didn't have anywhere else to go. Literally anywhere else in the fucking world, Eric. Not my house. Hey, she called me Eric. I let her scream and yell and make a big deal about it, and once she was done, I pointed out the fact that this wasn't for me, it was for my 15-year-old nephew. At that point, she really couldn't say no. She had sobered up in the last couple hours since the bar, where I convinced her to call in the bogus shooting at the school. After that, I gave her a ride home in Vanessa's car. Then, I stole her keys and went back to the bar. Stole her cruiser, but she didn't need to know about that part yet, and I was fine letting her figure it out on her own, after I was already dead or out of town. Once Jamie was safe inside O'Brien's house, I turned to leave. Aren't you coming inside too? No, I've got someone I gotta talk to first. That's too bad, she said. Do me a favor, try not to die. My next stop was the shitty gas station at the edge of town. I pulled into the parking lot to find Toulouse with a water hose, smoking a cigarette and spraying down the concrete. I parked, got out, went up to him, and snatched him by the neck and put him up against the wall. He calmly took the cigarette out of his mouth and smiled at me and said, Hey, detective. I held Vanessa's phone next to his face. The picture on the screen was the selfie he had taken with her. The last picture taken before she disappeared. Want to tell me anything? I asked. Not particularly, but if it'll keep you from kicking my ass, I'll tell you whatever you want. It will, I lied. Okay, so, here's the thing. Van and I were close, but you're like her dad pretty much, and I don't do well with parents. You've got 3 seconds to stop with the bullshit before I make you eat this phone. Okay, fine, you got me. I lied to you because I didn't really know if you were looking for her, or if you were one of them. Cut out with the vague pronouns. Who are them? I have no idea. The ones who took Van. I put the phone in my pocket, pulled out my Beretta, and put it up against his head, just in case there was any confusion about whether or not I meant business. But Jerry just chuckled and said sarcastically, Oh no, not a gun against my head. Look, detective, believe it or not, this ain't my first rodeo. Just tell me what you know. Well, you wouldn't have believed it yesterday, but maybe now you're ready. The truth is, someone took Van, but it wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was more like a month ago. I figured it out right away. That thing that came into work the next day, that wasn't her. Sure, it looked like her, sounded like her, acted like her, but I wasn't going to be fooled. Now, I know you're not going to believe this, but I have a little experience with clones, and she wasn't a very good one. I tried to figure out what I thought of all this. Honestly, I couldn't decide. Toulouse took my hesitation as an opportunity to put his cigarette back in his mouth and take a drag. I let go of his neck, then put my piece away and asked, Why would someone want to clone Vanessa? Isn't it obvious? She was the test run. If she could infiltrate Vanessa's life without raising suspicions, then they know the recipe works. But it didn't, so she had to go before anyone with credibility realized what happened. That was a couple weeks ago. It's entirely possible that they're still switching people out. Maybe they fixed the kinks in Vanessa, and now we don't even know who's real and who's been replaced. What's the point of switching people out with clones? Well, duh. This is the invasion, man. He finished his smoke, then flicked it off somewhere into the grass. Then I asked, The night Vanessa went missing, the real night she went missing, assuming this is true, did you see her? Yeah, we were together. Do you remember what she was wearing? What? Can you tell me what she was wearing the night she actually disappeared? Jerry thought for a second, then said, "Hold on a second," before digging out his cell phone, flicking through a few photos and then holding it out to me, showing a video he had recorded of Vanessa and him taking turns tossing a 2-liter bottle of soda at each other, while the other one tried to cut it in half with a sword. In that video, she wore jeans, a green long sleeve, and Donnie's brown jacket. When it finished, Toulouse smiled proudly at himself and then put the phone back in his pocket. This was the last night before, as you say, she was taken and replaced? Yeah, I had just gotten this rad sword and came up here to try it out. We ended up breaking it like 2 days later, but it was totally worth it. This was textbook crazy, but what he was saying made some kind of sense. There was no denying the facts. After that night in Toulouse's video, Vanessa started acting differently. Her best friend confirmed it, her brother confirmed it, even her phone confirmed it. She stopped taking selfies. For 2 weeks, it was like she was a different person. And then, the final straw. Her brother told her that he knew she wasn't the real Vanessa. And then, what? She gets out of there before anyone has a chance to suspect? Whoa, dude. What is that smell? Asked Toulouse. I snapped out of it. I realized what he was referring to and pulled out my gun. That thing. The juggernaut. It was here. And from that smell, I knew it was somewhere close by. Go inside and lock the doors, I said. Okie dokie, he answered before bounding into the gas station. I pointed the gun, scanning the edges of the parking lot where lights met darkness. And then I heard it, walking through the forest on the opposite side. I kept the gun aimed in the direction that I heard the noise coming from. A strange, inhuman gurgling breath, and the loud dragging of something heavy through the brush. I walked towards the noise. This was going to be a showdown. And if that thing killed me, I didn't want it taking out Toulouse just because he was there. Then, it stepped out of the forest, and for the first time, I saw it. And my blood ran cold. The thing, the juggernaut, almost looked human. In the same way a child's crayon drawing almost looks like a horse. The pieces were there, but the proportions were way off. It towered an easy 7 feet, even with the clear curvature in its spine that gave it a sideways hunch. It was inhumanly wide, like an upright grizzly. The hands, a dark shade of ashen gray, were hairy and compromised of fingers like sausages, and nails blackened from blood ruptures. As it dragged the sledgehammer across the pavement, it moved with an arrhythmic gait, as if it were still learning to walk on 2 legs of different sizes. Like a chimera from the ancient stories, this creature, stalking ever closer, was made up of mismatched parts. The head didn't come close to anything remotely human, but its visage. Its visage is burned into the core of my memory, in a place where no amount of therapy will ever allow me to forget. The face, if you can call it that, was coated in black scales and compromised of an elongated snout that formed the top of the jaw. The bottom was equally long, connected at a hinge like that of an alligator, with ivory hooks growing wildly in every direction from the maw. If the monster had eyes, I definitely couldn't see them. The lipless orifice hung open, exposing a wet tongue tangled in jagged rows. The teeth were overgrown like a cancer, and there was no way that thing could ever close its mouth without shredding its gums to pieces. I don't know how it ate, and I wasn't keen on finding out. The noise coming from within was a wheezing gurgle, steady, with each shallow breath. For the life of me, I couldn't figure it out, but somebody had gone through the effort to dress him. On the outside, an extra long black duster. Beneath, the body was more or less contained, within a long-sleeved blue jumpsuit, and on its feet were a new pair of enormous black tactical boots. There was this sort of fog around the creature, and as it came closer, I realized that the humming cloud around its face was actually a thick swarm of flies. Festering boils on its neck wriggled with maggots. I got dizzy just trying to fathom what I was looking at. But this must have been what they thought of when they first invented the word abomination. I kept my Beretta steady, waiting for the thing to charge. With the way it ran back at the bowling alley and at the cemetery, I likely wouldn't have but a split second, if that, to take it down. The gun was pointed at the widest part on its center of mass, the chest, where I quickly noticed a cluster of bullet holes already in the jumpsuit, stained black. Well shit, looks like I hit him already. Whatever this thing was, my pathetic 9mm wasn't going to do more than just annoy it. But at this point, running simply wasn't in the cards. Yet again, I found myself in that ever-familiar feeling of being a sitting duck. Think fast, you're running out of time. Options. Run, hide. No, too late for that. Shoot it? The thing took 4 shots to the chest before you launched it off the car. He's obviously not going down from bullets. Unless, headshot, could work. Go for the weapon, shoot his hands. Also valid options, but even without the hammer, a charge from that thing would be like getting run over by a truck. I need to slow him down. Slow him down. That's the play. I can keep a hammer's distance, but not if this thing starts moving like it did earlier. I pointed the gun at his knee and fired 6 shots in rapid succession. The cloud of flies exploded off the monster after the first impact. The creature stopped. But it didn't go down. It just stood there with its expressionless reptilian face. I waited. A tiny eternity. The thing shifted its weight onto its good leg and lifted the wounded one, moving it clumsily forward then landing. I held my breath and watched as it tried out the injured limb. Dragging the metallic weapon forward, it moved its other leg. It had just taken a step, and all those shots succeeded in doing was jack and shit. The cloud of flies had returned around the monster. I prepared myself to go out swinging. When he charges, start shooting. If there's a reason God decided not to let me die right then and there, I don't know what it could be. I'm not a good person. I've barely done anything with my time on this earth to make anybody miss me when I'm gone. But whatever the reason, this was not going to be the moment I had to face my maker. The partial deafness from the gunshots coupled with the situational blinders kept me from noticing the black vans until they had sped past me and screeched to a stop. I didn't see where the smoke grenades came from, but the parking lot was swallowed in a thick gray in a matter of seconds. The last thing my eyes were able to pick up was the juggernaut lifting the weapon over its head. When the shot started, I hit the ground. By my count, I was dealing with at least a half a dozen fully automatic weapons. I held my breath and started to crawl away from the fray. The next thing I remember, I was waking up on the floor of a moving vehicle, splitting pain in my side reminding me of all the shit I had put my body through that day. I was on my back when I came to and sat straight up. How the hell did I get here? The van rocked back and forth as we drove. There were no windows back here, only bench seats against the walls, and 5 heavily armed men in camo fatigues and tactical gear. In front of me was the 6th man, only he didn't have a weapon or a helmet or any kind of gear. He was just dressed in a tan t-shirt and jeans. When he saw I was awake, he smiled and said, "He's up. Good. Welcome back." Where am I? I instinctively reached for the spot on my side and found nothing but an empty holster. One of the armed men put a hand on my shoulder, his way of saying, "Take it easy. No sudden moves." "Don't worry, you're safe now," said the man in jeans. "That's not what I asked. Who are you people?" "We've been watching you for a while, detective. You're lucky we showed up when we did." This is it. I'm finally getting to see the man behind the curtain. "Where's Vanessa?" "Wow," the guy shot back. "You really have no idea what's going on, do you?" "I know enough. I know you're part of some shady organization with reach and pull. I know you're working on something big and willing to kill to keep a lid on it. And I know my niece was involved somehow." I was showing my hand, but at this point, I didn't really care. They had me dead to rights. Even if I'd played dumb, there was no way they were going to let me off with a warning. I also know you're responsible for what's been going on in this town. The disappearances, the phone calls from the dead, the weather. I don't know how, but I know. Let me stop you right there, he interrupted. You're embarrassing yourself, because not one part of what you just said was correct. Yeah, there's something going on here, but we're not it. We didn't take Vanessa. We've been trying for years to find out who or what is actually responsible for all this. Bullshit. So you're saying that this shithole small town just happens to have 2 secret paramilitary organizations? He laughed. No. Definitely more than 2. The van made a sharp right turn, and I started tracking seconds. I couldn't be sure how long I was out, or even how they knocked me out to begin with. But if I made it out of this van alive, I might be able to retrace my steps. Let me ask you something, Detective. How much time did you spend at that gas station? I mean, concurrently. Because it looks like you actually slept there. That place messes with your head, you know. Most people can't stand it for more than a couple hours at a time. I ignored the question and asked one of my own. So if you're not the ones who took Vanessa and framed me, then who the hell are you? You can consider us an interested third party. Yeah, I replied, echoing Spencer's words from yesterday. There sure seem to be a lot of those in this town. The man pulled a gun out from beneath his seat and pointed it. Before I could move, the men on either side of me clamped down on their grips on my shoulder, holding me in place. I looked at the gun and recognized it as my own Beretta. You Army? The man asked. I knew this guy. He was a ranger in the Army. You remind me of him. No, I'm not Army. The man nodded, then stared at the ground, like he was trying to decide what to say next. The van made another right turn and I restarted my count. It's weird that you were so careful, constantly watching your rear view, switching up cars, keeping an ear to the ground, and you still couldn't find the tracking device they put on your gun. Don't worry, we took it out. They have no idea where we are. They? The ones that actually took your niece. I wasn't buying this story for a second. After everything they had tried to throw me off the trail, this was just another elaborate setup. But why? Why not just let that thing kill me and be done with it? They were testing me to see what I knew, how much I'd figured out. For what it's worth, we've been trying to find her, but these guys are careful. They cover their tracks, avoid every camera, leave no footprints. Then you came along. They got sloppy. They got frustrated. They sent a night after a pawn, no offense. Fuck you, he continued. We finally captured one of their tall guys, and all we had to do was piggyback off their tracking device and follow you until it decided to show. This is a big deal for us. The van turned right. They're driving in circles. At this point, I knew there were 2 possibilities. Either this guy was telling the truth, or he was lying, and I couldn't decide which was worse. But regardless, one thing was clear. I needed to get out of this bathroom if I wanted to live. Once they were done questioning me, I was just a loose end. Okay, I said, trying to buy some time. You're the good guys. You want to take out the other secret organization. You must know more about them than me, right? Do you know about Planet X? Scientists have known about it for years that there's another planet out there, because they can see the effects. Jesus, does everyone in this town talk in sermons? They don't know what it looks like or even where it is, but they know it's there. The organization we've been tracking is huge, but all we get to see are the gravitational effects. Gravitational effects? Is that what you call an 18-year-old girl vanishing without a trace? He kept the gun pointed at me and reached his free hand into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone. As he typed one-handed, he spoke. They sent one of the tall guys to grab her after she left the gas station. We tried to catch up to him, we really did. And to be frank, we thought she was dead. Until the next day, she showed up for work like nothing ever happened. Took us a while to realize that the girl that came back wasn't really Vanessa Reagan. So you took her, right? Kidnapped the double agent for questioning? That's where the story's headed, isn't it? He pressed a button on the phone and held it out for me to view the video that played. I instantly recognized the aerial view of Vanessa and Jamie's neighborhood at night. The source must have been a drone. but it was steady and clear. This is the night she officially went missing. The camera was wide, but I could see the house in focus. I watched as a front door opened and Vanessa walked calmly to the edge of her driveway, in jeans and a yellow t-shirt. She looked down the road at something out of frame. Then I saw it. The sheriff's cruiser pulled to a stop and she got in the passenger seat. Then, they drove away. What is this? What in the ever-loving fuck is going on in this town? Are you familiar with the theory of pocket realities? The steady pop, 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 pop from somewhere in the distance arrested all of our attention. I instantly recognized it as automatic weapon fire, maybe a mile or so out. I could see the moment the same realization registered on the man's face. He jumped out of his seat and grabbed a radio somewhere in the front and yelled into it, "Victor, come in! Victor, we hear gunfire. Is the package secure?" There was no response from the other end of the radio, but the gunfire continued. And then, it didn't. We held all of our breath and waited, until a man yelled to the driver, "Turn around, we need to help him." I wasn't going to get a better distraction than this. I jumped out of my seat and wrapped my arm around the man's neck and spun him back towards me and used him as a human shield. Before he knew it, I had my Beretta again, and it was pressed against his head. "You're making a mistake. We weren't going to hurt you." "Yeah, I'll take my chances." I grabbed the handle of the van door and yanked it open and dove onto the wet grass. I did my best to tuck and roll, but still ripped my stitches and bruised both of my elbows sliding down the hill towards the forest. I could hear the van screeching to a stop as I pulled myself up, then ran into the thick cover of the trees. I spent hours out in the dark doing my damnedest to keep moving no matter what. I couldn't know if they were following me or not, but I wasn't going to take any more chances. Eventually, I hit a creek bed and followed it upstream until I hit an old bridge. Then I collapsed under it and slept till morning. After those few precious hours of rest, I started following the road back to town. I put my thumb out for the first passerby, hoping I might get lucky. Amazingly, it pulled over. The car was a new model shiny red Firebird, and the driver was an old woman that I knew from my childhood, Aggie Sistrunk. She didn't recognize me. She was already old when I was a kid, but at this point, I wonder if she even knows what day it is. Old Aggie offered me a swig of her medicine while she drove me back into town. I politely declined and she asked where I was headed. I gave her the address. Clyde didn't come home till around noon, which gave me plenty of time to raid his pantry, clean up my wounds, and of course, search his house for clues. I came up empty in the last category, but I'd already assumed that this was going to happen. If he were one of them, he wouldn't be sloppy enough to leave the evidence in his underwear drawer. Not that it was really much of an if anymore. I saw him in that video. He was driving the car that picked up Vanessa on the night she went missing. I should have seen it earlier. Of course the sheriff would have to know what's going on. An operation this size can't fly under law enforcement's radar forever. I wasn't expecting him to come home until much later, but I was ready just in case. I surprised him in his kitchen and let the Beretta do most of the talking. "Hey there, Sheriff. Fancy seeing you here." He went pale, but he didn't reach for his gun or put up a fight. I was hoping he wouldn't, but prepared just in case. Fortunately, things were working out. I took his gun, walked him into the den. There were no windows in here, no weapons, just seats that were arranged far enough apart that I could sit across from him without having to worry about him making a move. Once his ass was down on the couch, I poured him a glass of his most expensive scotch and set it on the coffee table in front of him. A professional courtesy. I took my seat on the divan across the room and broke the long silence. "I assume you know why I'm here." "You're a lunatic." "Maybe. Try harder." "We found the body in the trunk of Vanessa's car. I don't know why you're doing this." "Pull my other leg. It plays jingle bells." What followed was another heavy silence. I could see he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to do it. That was fine by me. As long as I was on this side of the gun, I didn't mind waiting. Finally, he broke down and grabbed the drink, put the whole glass back in one go. Then he said, "Well, how much do you know?" "That's not how this works, Clyde. You tell me what you know." "I had nothing to do with Vanessa's abduction." "Bullshit. You picked her up the night she disappeared." "What? Nah. I ain't talking about her. I'm talking about Vanessa. The girl I picked up wasn't even... He caught himself and took a long, sad breath before continuing. I had very specific instructions for what I was supposed to do if this ever happened. Instructions? From who? Tell me who you work for and this'll all be over soon. He gave me a chilling look that I'll never forget. Said, "Thanks for the drink, detective." I should have been smarter. I'll never forgive myself for being so careless, for not giving him a thorough pat-down. In the midst of all my planning, it had never occurred to me that he might have a second piece. The gun in his ankle holster was a PS1 single shot, a pocket shotgun. Before I could even scream no, he put the gun in his mouth and ate a bullet, then painted the walls of the living room. Jesus fucking Christ. My brain kicked into overdrive. Why would he do that? What do I do now? What's the play? I had no answers, but an overwhelming urge to get away from here as soon as possible. The cell phone in my pocket began to ring. Roger was calling. Do I answer? Does he know what happened? Can he help? I let it ring while I weighed my options. What options? There are no options. You leave this house, make sure there's no DNA, no prints, and get the fuck out of Dodge or you'll go down as a cop killer. My choices were looking pretty limited. I answered the phone.
Finally, I was starting to think they got to you.
Roger, listen to me. I'm in deep shit. Is this line secure?
Detective, this might be the only line in the whole town that isn't being monitored, but I can guarantee you that it's just the two of us.
I need to tell you two things. The sheriff is dead. I didn't kill him. There was a lull in the conversation that took so long I wondered if he'd been disconnected. Then Roger came back on the line with,
Oh, this is bad. Real bad. Should I assume that you're with the late sheriff right now?
You can assume.
Then you need to get out of there yesterday, because the chatter on the radio is all sorts about shots fired at the sheriff's house, and that came in 10 minutes ago.
Fuck! I made a break for the front door but stopped when I saw the flashing lights outside. I turned and ran to the back door, pushed it open, and took off towards the fence. But I made it 2 steps before I was surrounded. Every deputy was working that day. Actually, all but one. There were more guns pointed at me than I could count. I dropped to my knees, threw up my hands, and closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. They tackled me hard, and someone pushed his knee against my neck while they twisted my arms behind my back and put on the metal bracelets. A team of them dragged me out front and tossed me in the back of a squad car. They left me to cook for about an hour. The whole time, the only thing I could think was, why am I still alive? When they finally sorted out the crime scene, I was taken to the sheriff's station. I did my best to cooperate, but that didn't stop them from slamming me into a few walls and taking turns sucker punching me in the back and kidneys. To them, I was a monster. I was lower than garbage. And they were taking me to be with the only person as bad as me. The holding room was small, dark, and windowless, only big enough for 2 cells. And those cells were just simple metal cages. They threw me in the one closer to the door, then locked the cage behind me. Then they left us alone in there, shutting the door to the holding room and bolt locking it back into place. I looked at the man standing on the other side of the metal bars, the man trapped in the other cage. He smiled and laughed from his cot against the wall and said, "You look like shit, Reagan." "Yeah, I've been better." Spencer Middleton walked over to the bars, leaning against him as he said, "I think you should know something. This is only going to get worse." I reflexively took a step back. He'd gotten the jump on me once before, and I sure as shit wasn't going to stand close enough for him to grab me through the bars. I'm not sure how much worse it can get. I've been in this cell for a week now. Trust me, it's going to get worse. He smiled and scratched the scar on his neck. "I suppose you don't feel like taking this opportunity to tell me what the fuck is going on, do you?" "I'll tell you what's gonna happen. They're gonna spin a yarn about you, just like they did me. They'll sell some bullshit, the news will polish the bullshit, the people will eat the bullshit. And you'll eventually start believing it too. They're going to lie to you, but not me. I'll never lie to you. You want to know why? Why? Because I know the truth is so much worse." He laughed another long, self-satisfied laugh and turned to go back to his cot. As he got comfortable, he added, "You and me are gonna have a lot of fun, Reagan." I looked at the cot on my side of the cell. It wasn't much. Not even long enough for me to lay down without my feet and elbows hanging off the edges, but it was better than the floor. And right now, the idea of getting some real sleep was sounding pretty damn inviting. I woke up to a loud clang against the bars of my cell. The man standing on the other side to the exit was the one I had left in handcuffs at the hardware store the day prior. The bruise on Franklin's jaw was already a pronounced deep purple. I have to admit, I was a little proud of it. I could see the thing he used to wake me, a police baton in his right hand. No doubt this was going to be his turn for a little petty revenge. Alright, let's get it over with. Howdy, deputy, I said, standing to my feet and immediately remembering that my body was beaten and bruised. If it had been an option, I'd have chosen to stay in that cot until the judge threw the book at me and they put a needle in my arm. It's time for your phone call, Franklin said, unemotionally. He led me down the hall into another small room, where I was pretty sure I was about to get another round of beatings. But shockingly, the only thing in there was a small table and a corded telephone, which sat with the receiver off the hook next to it. Franklin locked the door, then nodded to the table. What's going on? I approached the table, anxiously awaiting some sort of trap, but none came. Once I was certain that Franklin wasn't going to crack my skull open with his baton, I reached out and grabbed the telephone receiver and put it to my ear. Hello? I said. The voice on the other end of the line was sad, tired but familiar.
Detective, I'm sorry it's come to this. I've tried every other plan I could think of, but I'm afraid we're out of choices. We go nuclear, or we all lose.
It was Roger.
The thing is, well, I'm sure you've already worked it out on your own.
I'm not leaving this place alive, am I?
I'm sorry.
Honestly, I'm surprised I made it this far.
You remember our agreement? I'd help you the best I could, and in return, I wanted a favor. Well, this is it. I'm calling in my favor. And prepare yourself, because this one's going to be a doozy.
Franklin took out his gun and I quickly scanned the room for a weapon to defend myself with. But then, he surprised me and turned the gun around and held it out. With a frown he said, "Make it look good." I snatched the gun away from him. "What is this?" I asked. Roger answered.
Your deputy friend owed me a favor too, and now, well, you know what to do. Try not to hurt him too bad.
Franklin closed his eyes and I swung the weapon hard, cracking him across the face, blood splurting all over the floor where he landed.
Good,
said Roger. I don't know how the hell he could see me, but at this point, I didn't care.
Now listen carefully, detective, because this is your turn. I know you know how to use that thing, and there's only one way this story ends with anything remotely resembling a happy ending. You have to go into that cell right now and put a bullet in Spencer Middleton's head. No half measures are gonna work. You have to kill him.
Why? I demanded.
They need him. I'm sure by now you figured this whole thing out. The invasion? Well, Spencer's the only one who knows where to get the ingredients they need to build their army.
Just tell me one thing. Is Vanessa alive?
I'm sorry, Eric.
I hung up the phone. That was enough. Am I really gonna do this? What else could I do? Take Franklin's gun and shoot my way out of the sheriff's station? No. I was done for. The only thing I could do to make my death count for something, and there was no person on the planet that I would say deserves a bullet behind the ear more than Spencer fucking Middleton. But was I going to be the one to literally pull the trigger? I took Franklin's keys, cracked the door and looked out. This was a straight empty hallway. On one end, the way out, through the station, full of angry men with guns. On the other, my holding room. My heart pounded in my ears as I walked alone to the back room, put the key in the lock. Spencer was staring straight at me when I opened up the door, like he'd been waiting for me. "Well, look at you," he said. "They turned you into their little bitch, huh?" "Turn around," I ordered. He refused to look away as he said, "Let me tell you something. If you're going to shoot me, you'd better not miss." Spencer was expecting this. I chambered around into Franklin's gun and prepared myself to do what I had to do. Spencer was a part of this conspiracy, and his death was going to fuck over the ones who took Vanessa. Bang. The fuck was that? Bang. Bang, bang! Somebody was shooting in the same building as us. I turned and looked back down the hallway. Well, how about that? Spencer taunted from behind me. Looks like you might need to preserve your ammo. The gunshots continued. Dozens of them now. Beyond that hallway, there was a firefight. It exploded in shots and then... nothing. The door at the other end of the hall came crashing off the hinges, along with a huge chunk of the wall. The beast was there, holding the sledgehammer, and this time, it wasn't alone. Behind it were two more creatures, just as huge and as terrifying. Their bodies matched, their clothes, their height, their wretched smell, but the heads on the other two were different. One had a somewhat human face. No hair, no ears, no nose, no lips. Its skin was chalk white. Its head was swollen up to an unnaturally large size. Its eyes were red and bulging. The third one's head was barely more than a skull covered in red and pink oozing boils. One eye socket was vacant. The other one held a single bloodshot eye. Its mouth was just a red skeletal smile. At their feet lay the bodies of several deputies. I pointed the gun and fired. Bang. Click. 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 I kept pulling the trigger, but son of a bitch, Franklin had only given me one bullet. I slammed the door to the holding room and scanned the area for weapons. But of course, there was nothing. Without even thinking, I got inside the empty cage and closed the door behind me and locked it. It didn't take long for them to break down the second door. The creatures stepped inside the room, their heads almost touching the ceiling, as all three of them piled in and walked right past me to Spencer's cell. He approached them with a big smile and said, "What the hell took you so long?" They all grabbed the door to Spencer's cage and pulled. The metal bent, then snapped free at the hinges, and then suddenly, Spencer Middleton was free. The creature stepped back against the wall, allowing him space to walk past. As he left the room, he looked back at me and said, "I'll see you around." I stood in the corner, watching the monsters as they followed him out the door. They weren't here for me, and now that they had gotten what they wanted, they were done and gone. I waited there in the cell, staring at the door until I couldn't take it anymore. I ran to the corner and threw out my guts. I had failed hard. And now it was only a matter of time before somebody found this bloodbath and pinned the whole thing on me. I still have the keys. I could make a run for it, grab Jamie and make a break for New Orleans, find a good attorney, or even slip off the grid for a while. There was no chance for justice anymore. I just lost the war, and now I needed to make a strategic retreat. I spit the last of the bile into the toilet and pulled the handle. Images of carnage and monsters still fresh in my mind while I tried to work out the plan. The next part was going to be rough, but I needed to get through it. Climb past the bodies, find one with car keys, take another car. Hey, detective. I turned around to see that psychopath standing there alone on the other side of the bars. What? Why did he come back? My words caught in my throat, but he didn't seem to mind guiding the conversation. Looks like something you ate must not have agreed with you, huh? Hey, before I go, I wanted to ask you something. He extended his hands between the bars, and when I saw what he was holding, a cold shiver ran down my spine. In case you were interested, my offer's still on the table. What do you say? Do you want to know where you can find her? That fucker had come back with a pair of pliers. I crossed the tiny cell where he stood, reached out and took them from him. He smiled a wicked smile, and I looked at the tool in my hands. Don't let him see you flinch. I ran my tongue across my teeth, trying to decide which one I would miss the least. I settled on one of my top bicuspids and put the pliers in my mouth. I can still feel the sensation of the metal touching my tooth, the way it shot up my nerve to a spot below my sinuses, as I pulled and wiggled it, trying to yank it free while Spencer choked on his own laughter. When I had finally detached it from my jaw, the blood was pouring steadily. I spat a mouthful onto the floor and placed my tooth in Spencer's outstretched palm. Then, I ripped a piece of cloth from my sleeve and bit down on it to stop the bleeding, while Spencer inspected it like a diamond assessor. Once he was satisfied, he told me where I could find Vanessa's body. I walked into the gas station looking and feeling like shit. A quick scan of the place told me that there weren't any customers in there. Behind the counter, Jack sat at his laptop typing. Toulouse leaned on the counter next to him, reading a magazine. When they saw me, I heard Jack say, "Hey, check it out, the detective's still alive." Toulouse nodded and said, "Yeah, look at him go. Good for him," before turning his attention back to the magazine. My stomach turned and I went straight for the bathroom where I started dry heaving into the sink. If there had been anything left in my stomach, I'd have lost it there. How am I even doing this? I looked at my reflection in the mirror and noticed that the man dressed as a cowboy was standing in the corner behind me. I spun around and screamed at him, "What the fuck? Who the fuck even are you, man?" He was thankfully wearing all of his clothes this time, including a red bandana around his neck and a cowboy hat. With a wry smile, he held out a ball-peen hammer and in a calm voice said, "Make good decisions." I can't explain why, but that weird sentence hit me with a sense of calm and renewed focus. I took the hammer, thanked him, and left the bathroom. The wall behind the notice board, that's where you'll find her. Jack and Toulouse didn't nearly seem surprised enough by what I was doing, smashing a huge hole into the wall of the gas station with a hammer. I kept swinging, breaking the hole open wider and wider. I didn't stop until the wall was gone, exposing the dried, shriveled corpse of a young girl inside. From the looks of her, she had been dead for a long time. Her skin had turned gray and her face was unrecognizable, but her clothes still looked clean and new. A pair of blue jeans and a yellow t-shirt. O'Brien was the first on the scene. She's the one who wrote up the official report, which I got to look at a couple of weeks later. An unknown man came into the gas station, broke a hole in the wall, and revealed the corpse of a young missing girl. The body was dried of all blood post-mortem, which was probably the reason for the accelerated mummification process. DNA samples and dental records proved conclusively that this was the body of Vanessa Riggin. But I knew the truth. That wasn't my niece. Spencer was very clear in the way he worded his offer. "I'll tell you where you can find the body of a certain girl." He had been referring to the double the whole time. There was a funeral, but neither Jamie nor I bothered going. I moved some money around and got the kid out of town. I won't say where he is, but believe me when I say he's in a safe place now. As for my legal troubles, well, they went away on their own. One final departing gift from the ones in charge, maybe. Besides, it's hard to arrest somebody for killing the sheriff when the sheriff isn't dead. Yeah, I got a message not too long from O'Brien saying Clyde showed up the next day for work. Everyone decided to pretend that he never tried to give himself amateur brain surgery. In fact, there's no record of anyone dying in that nice little peaceful town the whole time I was there. I had almost convinced myself that the entire thing was a stress-fueled delusion. But yesterday, I got a package in the mail at my office with no return address. The only thing inside was Donnie's brown jacket. Then last night, I got a phone call.
"Hey, Uncle Eric?"
It was a girl's voice. "Yeah, this is Eric."
"Do you know who this is?"
"Vanessa?
They told me I can talk to you for a second."
Where are you?"
"I don't know. Some kind of hospital, I think. What is this? What's going on?"
"I don't know."
"There's a man here who wants to talk to you."
"No, Vanessa, don't."
"Hey, detective."
She handed off the phone. I recognized the voice instantly. "Spencer, what do you want?"
"Me? I don't want anything. I just thought I'd let you know that, despite all my objections, they're taking really good care of Vanessa."
"Please, is that what you want to hear? You want to hear me beg? Please don't hurt her, just let her go."
"It's already too late for that. Even if she went home, Right now, there's no way anyone would believe she's the real one. Even you, right now, you have your doubts, don't you? The line between what's real and what isn't has started to blur. There might not as well be one anymore. And that's what they want. They want you doubting your own eyes. They want you to wonder who's real and who's been replaced. Because that's part of the attack. And when you can't trust the person next to you, that's when they'll know they've already won. It's a brave new world, detective. And if I ever see you again, I'll skin you alive.
The line went dead. I've tried tracking the number, but even my computer guy said it was a high-tech dead end. It's been months now since I started looking for my lost niece, and I've used this time to prepare. Next time I go back to that town, I'll be ready. I won't get caught off guard. And when I finally find her, there's going to be hell to pay. Spencer isn't a complicated guy. I understood his message good and well. It sounded like it was a warning, but it wasn't. It was an invitation. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all my $10 and above patrons, Mr. Swiston, Official Jerboa, and Chaos X. If you want to get mentioned at the end of every video, go to the Patreon link down below and become a patron at the $10 or above tier. Thank you.